Hey everybody, welcome to another hang up here on the line on Wednesday. I'm at Dillahunty. What am I hung up on tonight? Well, science education a little bit. I'm frustrated. Now, we just did an amazing work here on the line doing a fundraiser for recovering from religion, raised over $66,000. We did so much that I actually had to go and get a tattoo, which I posted a video suggesting that maybe I'd get it on top of my head. That was not going to actually happen. So I have the tattoo on my calf of the drawing that Seth did. I'll see about getting a picture maybe posted later. But we've been doing great work here at the line, both for ourselves, for the community, and for recovering from religion. I'm not a scientist, though. I'm just not. And I wouldn't even say I'm a science expert. I think if we kind of investigated, I have an above average understanding of a good section of science, and probably an even better understanding when it gets into the philosophy of science sort of stuff, where we're talking about, you know, test methodology, when we're talking about the epistemology and how science is constantly coming up with the best tentative models to explain the world, to explain the facts that we have, to come up with the explanations that account for the most facts within each given field. And it's something that, we talk about a lot of it in ways that is not as clear as it could be. And we'll get into kind of side arguments when somebody says the scientific method, and then, oh, well, there's not the scientific method or a scientific method. There are scientific methods. Yes, but what about, observation, hypothesis, testing, attempts to replicate peer review, and then, you have a theory or model. Yeah, you can nuts and bolts, a number of things like that. But I remember when I was a kid, science was just fun. Like, of all the classes that I was forced to take as part of an education that I really didn't appreciate at the time, science was probably the most fun. It was, there were moments where you'd learn about, dinosaurs, and then you'd also learn about um, disease vectors, and you'd learn just little bits of chemistry. You'd get to do some experiments. You'd get to do some physics stuff. I remember, when I got out of high school, and I went into the Navy's nuclear power program. One of the first classes that we had to take after we got through, electronics A school, and I was in power school, was heat transfer and fluid flow, thermodynamics, essentially. And it was something that I never really had any background in at all during my, junior high and high school science classes. And I loved it. It was really cool. It was, hey, here's the physics of, heat transfer. Here's the, if you're going to learn about nuclear reactors, you have to kind of learn that stuff. So I always loved the science. What Arden and I do in our off time is science in a biological sense. We keep and breed a number of different species of reptiles. We have snakes and lizards, and so there's the normal husbandry part. Like, you could go to Texas A&M and Texas A&M's School of Animal Husbandry. You could go there and you learn about the husbandry part, but then there's also the genetics of, hey, we're doing basically Mendelian genetics, where we have incomplete dominant traits, on occasions, in with some of them, codominant traits. What is line bred? What's not? Which ones are allelic, that are going to potentially have some sort of superform in the phenotype, which I know for a lot of you, everything I just said sounded like blah, 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 and all it is when we're breeding snakes, for example, the genotype is whatever is in the genes, and the phenotype is whatever you see. And yet, part of what's going on with, for example, ball python breeding, where once upon a time there were 2 or 3 different morphs. You had the normal dominant trait, and then you had the recessive trait of albinism. You had another recessive trait of piebaldism. And then you started seeing some incomplete dominant traits. You'd get some some unusual snakes. But what they're doing when they're breeding there is trying to determine which features that we see are actually heritable traits, reliably heritable traits, in the sense of this one definitely has this gene that we're going to call lesser or butter, which are the same genes, by the way. And when we breed it, 50% of the babies just show up with that trait. And so that lets us know that it's an incomplete dominant trait. Without getting into more and more lecturing on the snake stuff, there's science there that is fun. And it's not really in dispute. You might have disagreements or arguments about whether or not you've proved out a trait, whether you're not sufficiently you've proved out a trait, or whether you have a line bred trait or whatever else. But it's interesting to me because we now have people who are denying that the Earth is an oblate spheroid. I don't know how they can look at the information and the facts in the world, the fact that we've known about the shape of the planet for ages, and yet still they reach the conclusion that the Earth is potentially flat with a big ice wall around it. There are people who deny every aspect of vaccines. Now, the Chinese were involved in variolation in the 10th century. And we gradually progressed further and further until by the time we get around to, the end of the 18th century, vaccines as we know them are starting to become all the rage. What happened to the period of time where I was a kid and we would learn about the history of the world from a biological evolution standpoint, where we talked about dinosaurs and extinct species and used those lessons as leverage to get us to care more about other things? It's like you do a field trip to the zoo and the kids, some of them are just like, oh, let me look at the cool animals, and awesome. If it's not your thing to go any deeper than that, cool. But we used to inspire people to say, I want to do that. Not only do I want to be a zoologist, I want to be a veterinarian. I want to be a biologist. I want to be an evolutionary biologist. I want to be a microbiologist. I don't know why anybody would want to do that, but my ex-wife was a microbiologist and she taught me all kinds of things about siderophores, chelating iron, and all kinds of stuff. And now we've got climate change deniers. We don't tend to follow the science. I know there were some mistakes made. I know that for a period of time, we held scientists and doctors and others in similar positions to such a high esteem that it became cliche to put everybody in a lab coat for every commercial. And as we got to a point where we got, we had more and more information about the world, we also had more misinformation and more potential deception. And because of that, maybe people don't trust as much as they used to. And that's fine. Trust should be earned and deserved. But to go down the unskeptical, completely cynical route of suggesting that there's a big science conspiracy to hide the truth of the world, or to, that NASA is working together with the Bilderbergers and whoever else to deny the Earth's true flat shape and our lizard overlords, and that the aliens have been here doing and building stuff it's just a parade that distracts us from real problems related to climate change, from the issues that are coming around the corner for us to have to deal with. We have the potential of who owns your DNA? Can it be cloned? If somebody clones you, what do you have any say in that? Do you have, as we move forward, yes, we need to do the things that are going to save us from destroying ourselves, we hope. But there are bigger questions coming down the road, and they're going to require a really good understanding of science in a broad sense, and hopefully giving people the opportunity to have some narrow, specific sense. Because I think the more you know about maybe one avenue of science, the finer detailed you get into some pockets of science, the more appreciation you have for all of the other pockets, the less likely you are to fall prey to Dunning-Kruger levels of confusion, because when you see how much work and effort you can put into just learning the basics of genetics for breeding, or just learning how to actually treat disease, you know, how much a virologist has to study just to have a good understanding of this, let alone all of the other medical fields, it gives you an appreciation for the rest of them. It gives you maybe a sense of humility that couples with that sense of awe. Now, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a science communicator. I might know some of it better than most people. But tonight's guest is coming in to fix all of this. We're going to fix it all in the next couple of hours. No effort. It's all real easy. Dr. Aron Adair is here. And here's how things are going to go tonight. First of all, as always, theists are going to have priority. So if you're a theist and want to actually defend your views about whether or not the earth is designed or life is designed by God, we're happy to do that. But if you have specific science questions or specific things about science that have confused you, please call in and we'll put you to the front of the queue as well. I may not have the answer. Aron may not have the answer, but that I think is a good thing. And so the question I've got, Aron, as an actual scientist and as an actual science communicator, where do we need to focus to try to fix the problems that we've got from having had so much access with so little understanding in a short period of time, with the internet dumping things out that people just reject? And hi, welcome.
Hi. Well, I'm not a scientist. I just play one on television.
Yeah, fair.
Okay. If I could start off maybe with a little bit of optimism, because I remember that there are like fairly regular surveys of the American population about their attitudes towards science and scientists. And I was just looking at the results that were published, I think, earlier this year in the journal PNAS or PNAS. But if I say that too many times, YouTube will cut our funding, so I got to be careful. But in that journal article I'm looking at, and it shows, a lot of really positive results. So if you ask, according to this, population of Americans they asked, and you say, hey, do you think scientists are competent? 81% agreed. Only 5% disagreed. And then a chunk of people not so sure. 70% say their scientists are trustworthy. 68 are honest, ethical. The likability score isn't so great. The feeling superiority to others, that's things that could be worked on. But things like that are pretty good. Scientific findings, do they help the U.S. as a whole? 80% say yeah. Do they help me in particular? 74% say yeah. There's a lot out there saying if you go out and you ask the average person, they will say pretty positive things about science and scientists. Probably where we're going to butt heads is that there's a polarization effect, and those people who are polarized against it are the loudest. And there'll be particular bugaboos where people will believe scientists when it talks about like computer science and building artificial intelligence models. But then you tell me I gotta get rid of my gas truck because of global warming, then I'm gonna find any reason I can to push back against that because it's triggering all sorts of other social cues. So I just want to start off with that optimism that actually we have. We live in a time where people will say yes to science, yes to funding science. We just now have to know how to crack particular nuts rather than, acting like we're Galileo and literally the whole system is against us.
Yeah, it may be that I am jaded and out of touch because I'm going to get I don't get to interact with kids. I think that's probably what's missing in my life, is that I don't have kids. And because of that, I don't tend to interact with kids too much. And so I don't see, I have friends who are teachers. Matter of fact, I have a sister-in-law that's a teacher. And this was Teacher Appreciation Week. And so or maybe it was last week that was Teacher Appreciation Week, but I went out and appreciated the teachers in my life. I got a couple of cousins and an old friend. But are we seeing, there's been a concerted push to try to inspire kids to get more involved in STEM sort of subjects. Are we seeing success at all in that area? Is this just a bunch of, is it all okay, boomer? You think the earth's flat crap and the kids are going to be okay. Or do we have, some kind of crisis of kind of just general mistrust? You mentioned, when you tell me I got to get rid of my gas vehicle, also it's just straight up objections to the basic science of evolution and biology because it conflicts with
Mm.
some people's religious views and things like that. Um, I mean, I appreciate the optimism. What can I do? I'm not a
Mm.
scientist, not a science communicator. I mean, apart from getting, like I said, you and Forrest and Erika on the show, um, I feel like I'm screwing up.
There's a few things that I think will push people away from either a particular scientific finding or science generally. One is if you make science boring, if you make it sound like a laundry list of facts and you're an idiot for not having already known it, that you don't know the difference between a sulfate and a sulfite, that's going to push a person off from science
Sure.
completely. It's just going to be a bunch of arrogant jerks. And then, yeah, why would you even want to care about that? But most importantly, perhaps, is in general, if you are going to teach someone something and it goes against their intuition or some sort of deeply held belief, you have to find some way of, in a sense, making that belief safe. Or you have to fundamentally change, all the politics of that person, which is harder to do in a conversation than find ways of uh, better signaling what the science is and why it may not necessarily be that scary. I'll just give an example separate from religion. Say nuclear energy, nuclear power. So if you have a person who is afraid of building nuclear power plants because they expect it to go boom and go like 100 Chernobyls, there are things you can do to try to point out actually how absurdly safe in many ways nuclear power is, and that frankly you're going to get more radiation from the coal plant than you are from the nuclear plant. You're going to get way
Yeah.
more mercury from the coal plant than the nuclear plant. And having lived for quite a while near a coal burning plant in my hometown, uh, keeps making me a bit worried about what's happening to the fish around there.
Yeah. And as I mentioned,
So
I was
yeah.
in the Navy nuclear power program. So I got sold really quickly on the safety of it because not only, um, you know, did we study the specifics of the reactor and we were essentially trained to be reactor operators, but I served on ships that had nuclear power plants on them. They, anyway, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you on that.
Yeah. No, no, no. And yeah, and of course there are ways of trying to at least make the subject a little bit less scary. Some of it just might be the cold hard facts of like here's the statistics about how many people has nuclear power killed, or how many people die per kilowatt hour of energy that's produced by it. Things like, or sorry, how much power per kilowatt or what have you. Or if people are afraid of radiation because it's this weird invisible thing, make it visible. So how about I tell you how to build your own particle detector?
Mm.
What you're going to do is you're going to take a trip down to CVS, get isopropyl alcohol. I recommend at least 95% alcohol by volume. The higher, the better. You're also going to need some dry ice and maybe something that can hold the liquid. When I've done this before, I've got like a little petri dish and put like some sort of fur on the outer edge of it, so that way I get that wet with the isopropyl alcohol. Can put a lid on that, and inside there as well, I will put some sort of radioactive source. When I did this before, when I used to teach high school, I literally got in the mail a radioactive source, a little piece of what's called Fiestaware. It's this plate with this orange glaze. If you get Fiestaware now, it's not the same as it was in the old days where it was made with uranium oxide. You could probably guess why they stopped selling that version.
Sure.
But you get a little piece of that, and it actually will shoot off like alpha and beta radiation. If you put that in the middle of the petri dish, put that on top of the dry ice, it turns it into a cloud chamber. And as charged particles, such as alpha radiation particles, it actually zips out and leaves a little trail, a little ghostly trail shooting through the cloud of alcohol that's in there. So you can literally at home build your own particle accelerator and see what it looks like. And I think when it becomes a little bit more tangible, it's not just this invisible thing that's out to get you, I think that makes it a little bit more comfortable to think about and discuss. And also, it's
Yeah,
just freaking cool.
it is. And I remember I had lots of fun things related to science. Maybe it exists now. I think that a good chunk of this is just me not engaging with school age kids at all anymore. Um, Not only, I mean, if you look back across the pond in the UK, Dawkins was essentially doing science education on TV with really cool kind of demonstrations about, the eye, or here's some things about physics. And, kind of like a slightly more, uh, slightly less manic version of Bill Nye, because Dawkins is not always a bucket of excitement. It really good content, teaching the basics of
Yeah.
science. And then you had, Bill Nye and other science communicators. I've mentioned before, one of my favorite videos of all time is actually not so much on the science thing, but it's called Donald in Math Magic Land, and it was a 1950s, I think 56 Disney production that's like 30 minutes, and it's amazing. Now it cheats and is a little dishonest in a couple of areas when it starts talking about um, the golden ratio, the golden rectangle, and where it does and doesn't appear. But it's a really good kind of introduction to, in some cases, some aspects of physics, because it's taking Donald through math, but it's showing how math relates to music by bisecting a string to get another note that's exactly one octave higher, and how if you divide it up into, based on different fractions of that, you're going to get the 12 tones of the music scale. And
Mm.
then it goes to pool. So it's funny watching that video now. It is in part everything that helped make me me. I played semi-pro pool and was addicted to, a pool and billiards from the get-go. I loved math stuff. I loved science stuff. I loved uh, the golden ratio, and even got into the kind of early on, the mystical aspects of it that people would try to attribute to those things. And that helped when I started focusing on skepticism, to say, oh, people are making these connections and seeing patterns because that's what we're really good at, not necessarily because there's a pattern that was intentionally put there by a designer, but that we are really good at spotting the patterns. I'm wondering,
Yeah.
um, just within the curriculum, is there, and I guess, do you know, fun? Have we killed off the fun?
It can depend on the teacher. So, if in doubt, if I want to make sure my students were paying attention, I would need to do something maybe a little bit self-deprecating. If I'm teaching them electromagnetism, I bring out a cattle prod and occasionally show them what it does to me. Things like that. Make sure they're paying attention. Um, I actually remember a couple times I wanted to show them the effects of the wave nature of light. So I got a laser pointer and I said, if you pass this over a hair, it'll actually produce a diffraction pattern. And if you know the wavelength of the hair, you can make some measurements and figure out. I'm sorry, if you know the wavelength of the laser, you can actually figure out what the thickness of the
Right.
hair is. Now, I'm not going to ask my students for hair, so I just pull one of mine out. And again, does it get their attention? It's like, oh, look at what Dr. Adair is doing again. Uh, things like that to be at least a little bit fun, and also try to do demos that are somewhat engaging, including if it relates to skepticism. You mentioned, I remember when I first learned about like the stuff that James Randi was doing, and I'm like, I'm hooked. This is my deal. This is awesome. And so there were several occasions for like high school students I had. I did the homeopathy overdosing right in front of them. I think I did it
Yes.
like multiple times in one day for different classes I had. So it's like, hey, I got this dispenser. It's supposed to give me one at a time. Break. And these are sleeping pills. So nothing, of course, actually happens because I show them the math on the board. And it's like, yes, I would have had to have eaten an ocean of this to maybe have gotten one molecule of the caffeine, which somehow was supposed to put me to sleep, because that's weird.
I love the demonstrations with regard to homeopathy. I love, you doing what Randy did as well, which is, I'm going to eat a whole bottle of these homeopathic sleeping pills. But the various kind of The way people explained everything that's wrong with homeopathy, um, I just, I might be the weird one. I just found all of it absolutely interesting and enthralling because not only does it show that we can scientifically understand that homeopathy is nonsense, um, if if not even more strongly than that, but how we know it. And then I get into the whole skeptic side of this, where I'm curious how and why people can buy into this if in fact
Mhm.
they've been told, because the basics of homeopathy are simple. One is that like cures like, which is not a thing. It's not like there's some universal rule out there that like cures like or anything else, but that's the basics. The next one is that water molecules have a memory of the things that they've come in contact with. And so one of my favorite quotes comes from Tim Minchin in Storm, where, and I'll get the quote wrong, but essentially, the water remembers all of the chemicals in there that you're looking for, but somehow forgets all the poop that it's come in contact with, in its lifetime. Um, and then you have this mixing process where you take one drop of the substance and 100 drops of water and mix those together, and you shake them up. And there's something specific about how much you shake them. And then you take one drop of that solution and you put that with 100 drops of water, and you shake that solution. And now you've got, a 1x solution, or that one might be a 2x solution. But anyway, you keep doing that for a long time until there's not a single molecule of the original active substance that is left in even a sizable sample. And you're selling water because it has a
You're
memory.
selling water if you did it right. If you did it wrong, who knows what other contaminants are in there? Because honestly, um, I actually worry when I do that overdosing, not that I'm going to actually, poison myself because the chemical is so powerful. I worry about the manufacturer being crappy and putting all sorts of extra stuff that doesn't belong in there, or failing to put stuff in there. Or if they really say it's supposed to be a really low dose of belladonna, but they actually put in a significant amount, and now I'm poisoned. Uh,
Yeah,
it's one of
and
the yeah.
because they sell these, as supplements under a different category, it's not like they have to, go through proper FDA guidelines on, the process they're making. And I would also suggest that if the manufacturers of homeopathic solutions know what and know and understand the process, which they should have to know and understand the process if they're going to actually manufacture this, then somebody there knows there's nothing left of the original solution. And if anybody there is not, 100% sold on the magic part of it, what's stopping them from just taking tap water that's, you know, untested with whatever? I mean, it's the same thing you're talking about, and then just selling
Yeah.
it. If there's no quality assurance guidelines, I mean, I could, I think I could create um, something that I could label homeopathic, and there would be absolutely, and it could just be, you know, filtered water from a fridge. I don't know that there's a single test that could be done to show what the difference is between that water and the homeopathic water.
The only test you could do is the price tag.
I could charge a lot for water from the fridge. I need the ice maker just went out on the fridge, so I can still get water out of it, but I can't get ice cubes, and it's going to cost probably 200-300 bucks to get somebody to come over and fix the ice maker. So maybe I should just sell off whatever water I'm getting as homeopathic, atheistic homeopathic remedies. Um, I can mark it up a little bit, like 20% over what GNC sells it for.
It'll be at least as effective as when Peter Popoff was selling Dead Sea water, seawater.
I'll tell you what, we've got a couple calls here. I'm gonna try and take one right now. But as a reminder, normally on this show, at the end of it, after we get done taking calls, we read off all the super chats that are $10 or over. Today, I lowered that down to $5. We're going through all the super chats that are $5 and over. But if you have questions, if you have science questions, now's the time to get them in, especially if they're questions where Aron and I both have to say, yeah, we don't know. Or some of my favorites is, as far as we can tell, nobody knows. And here's, the path to us potentially finding out what the answer to that's going to be. But I'm going to start by taking Roberto, who's supposedly calling from Cuba. Pronouns are he, him. Hola, Roberto. How are you? You're on with Dr. Adair and Matt. Hello. Well, I'm going to put Roberto back in the queue. Roberto is calling to say that atheism has no scientific basis for its truth claims about God. And I'm really wondering what truth claims atheism makes about God, because I'm not convinced that we do. But all right, we'll put Roberto back in the queue. And we've got Michael in Texas. Pronouns are he, him. Has a tentative proof that God doesn't exist in some cases. Well, that's wild. Hey, Michael, you're on with Dr. Adair and Matt.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Aaron. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
I'm all right.
All right. So I'm an atheist, but I'm an avid worshiper. I pray to the spaghetti monster at least 5 times a day.
Cool. What's that do for you?
But not much, really. I came up with an argument, and I know, Matt, you're good at debating and coming up and defeating arguments. So I thought that I would give this pass by you, and let me know if you think it's any good.
Go for it.
All right. So proof that God doesn't exist. So basically, if the multiverse is true, there is at least one possible universe where humans don't exist. So if there is no creation, there is no creator. And therefore, there is at least one possible universe where God doesn't exist. And basically, my reasoning was, if God is omnipresent, then there is a possible universe where he doesn't exist. What did I say? Okay. If God is omnipresent and there is there's a possible universe where he doesn't exist, that means that God exists only in a limited number of universes, or he doesn't exist at all. And I'm going to side on the doesn't exist at all, because it really wouldn't make sense for God to exist in some universes and not in others.
May I take a quick stab at this?
Please.
Okay. So I would have to probably diagram this out to see if it's a valid argument, but just to approach the premises, and here's what I could imagine someone pointing at. One, your first premise is multiverse, and since we don't have, demonstrable evidence that, makes it so it's clear that there's a multiverse, you're already starting from a very weak premise. And of course, if you want to reach massive metaphysical implications, you want to start with strong premises, especially one that your interlocutor would accept. But even accepting a multiverse, even saying such a thing is, saying that in some universes there are no humans, how could you possibly know that? Because the Christian or other believer could just come back and say, God created the multiverse and has humans of some sort existing in all those universes. The only way you could claim there isn't is basically you would have to assume God already doesn't exist or have those properties, which is basically being circular. So I think the first two premises are kind of dead in the water in your conclusions.
I completely agree. Those are the same notes that I had. You have no way of demonstrating the multiverse is true, but you also don't have a way to show that humans aren't a necessary component in every possible universe within the multiverses. Mm-hmm. And then the next one is, if there's no creation, there's no creator. So first of all, this is predicated on the notion that there's at least one possible universe where humans don't exist, but in that universe itself would still be a creation. It's not humans that are the creation that point to the creator. It's the existence of everything that the creationists say. It's not like humans are evidence of God. It's all of creation that is evidence of God. So that falls apart as well. And yeah, Aaron wanted to diagram it out to see if it's valid. I didn't diagram all of it. It's not valid. It's not valid, and it's probably not sound. And it sounds like what you're doing in some sense is the exact opposite of a modal logic ontological argument for the existence of God that would conclude that because God exists in some possible world, God exists in all possible worlds. And you seem to be trying to do the opposite of by saying if there's some possible world where God doesn't exist, then you're going to go with, which isn't a logical conclusion anyway. So nice try, but it seems to mostly be in need of a lot of fine tuning.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that advice. This is my first argument, so I think I think I did pretty good. But you guys picked it apart pretty good. The other question I had was, I've been having these dreams, like very emotional, and they're like I would say they're nightmares, but it's where every single dream that I have, I get converted back into Christianity, and it's just disheartening because I've spent so much time in both camps, like converting back and forth, and I really don't want to be a Christian again. So, what's your advice for that?
Why would so? For example, I'm a little weird. I almost never remember my dreams. Like most nights when I wake up, it's like there's just a complete gap and a complete gap of nothing between whatever time I fell asleep and got up. I know that I do dream normally, just my brain doesn't retain it. On rare occasions, I will remember, I think in part because I'll wake up during a dream and I'll want to communicate it kind of quickly. At no point do I have any reason to think that my dreams have any accuracy to them about, if I have a dream about a potential future, I don't have any reason to think that that dream was foreshadowing an actual future. It's not, if I had to guess, it sounds to me like your dreams are products of your anxiety and frustration related to your deconstruction process. And I'd recommend reaching out to one of the counselors at Recovering from Religion or the Psychotherapy Project. But at the end of the day, not only do we not seem to have any control over our dreams or very little control over our dreams, like there's some ways to kind of guide things, and there's lucid dreaming and stuff like that. But I don't put much stock in the individuals who are saying that dreams can tell us a lot about ourselves. I don't know how you tell the difference between you having strong anxiety about your deconversion or a legitimate fear that you've overlooked something and you are concerned about a potential future here, or you ate some bad food and slept on your arm wrong, and that caused your brain to, spin off into this. I don't know, Aaron, what do you think on the dreams front?
There's actually a line from A Christmas Carol that when Marley comes as a ghost, Scrooge is like, oh, "You're just some bit of bad mustard I ate."
Yeah.
But to be more connected to this, I certainly don't know how to control dreams. And when I try to remember what dreams I have, like ones that are still kind of vividly in my head, like dreams where I'm flying, which I don't think I've had that dream in like a decade. In that dream, it just feels totally normal and natural. Like I even remember in those sorts of dreams that this is absolutely right, that I put my arms out straighter, I slow down, put my arms back, and I'm basically Naruto running through the trees, through the air. I wake up and know that's not real, but in that environment, everything feels normal. And what causes it, boy, that's well beyond my knowledge. Because yeah, neuroscience stuff is definitely beyond what I know. But that it might be revealing anxieties you have, social anxieties, there might be something to that. But on the other hand, one of the other dreams I remember rather vividly from a young age is literally the opening to the show Fraggle Rock. So I would not overinterpret anything.
Okay.
How far are you in time, Michael, from having left Christianity?
Last time I was a Christian, this was about 1 year ago, and I know you guys talked about like anxiety or emotional trauma, but I actually went to this baptism camp in Ethiopia, and they had like these geysers, and I was blacking out from hydrogen sulfide asphyxiation. So there's a lot of trauma there, and yeah, I was tied up underneath a geyser. It was terrible. It was for
Underneath the
exorcism
geyser?
purposes.
How'd you get
Yeah,
underneath the
underneath a
geyser?
geyser. There's a church camp built around this geyser that they think is somehow holy or something.
I'm going to guess that I'm just being overly pedantic. And when you say tied up underneath a geyser, you're talking about tied up next to a geyser where you would be underneath the water spray from it.
Right, right. Yeah,
Okay.
I wasn't beneath the earth. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's a phrase that I had to process because I haven't heard it before. So,
Yeah.
hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
I've never heard of this sort of baptism before, so now I'm going to have to look this up because now I'm interested and scared.
Yeah, it's I tell you this, Michael. First of all, give yourself some time. Maybe the dreams will ease off. If they don't, it's definitely something worth talking about with, a counselor. But when you wake up in the morning, it might be worth it for you, since you seem to be the kind of person that's going to remember your dreams. It might be worth it for you to keep a dream journal. I haven't done this, but I've heard from
Right.
people who suggest it. And if nothing else, you can write down what dream you have every single day and maybe put a rating system on it as to how much it bothered you. Because if it turns out you're only being bothered by dreams specifically about potentially reconverting to Christianity, and you're not being bothered about other dreams, then maybe that'll give you some perspective on how often they're happening or what else is going on in your life when you have those particular dreams. Did you end up having an argument with a family member about religion, and then you went to sleep and you had that dream? Or, does it come up when you're dealing with financial struggles or, whatever else? Keeping a journal like that so that you can see how things are correlated can be very helpful. If not for actually getting to the root of the problem, it might just get you to the point where you can say, hey, if I were to worry about all my other dreams the way I worry about this one, I would never get anything done and I wouldn't have any reason at all. I'd be terrified of everything all the time. And maybe I should just let the dreams go.
Yeah. I find what helps is I watch some YouTube shorts about atheism, and that usually like changes my viewpoint on, because I wake up convinced that God might be real. Like it's it's kind of disheartening, but I have to reconvert. I have to deconvert myself every time I have one of those dreams.
Well, if you're only convinced that God might be real, that's different from being convinced that God is real. I'm not convinced
Yeah.
of any kind of God that even might be real, but it'd be very interesting to hear, is it just the fact that you dreamed about it that makes you kind of more open to the notion that God might be real? Or are you dreaming about things where, there's an actual case, an argument, and evidence that would suggest that God might be real?
No, there's actually no argument, but it's just um, maybe it's my brain's neurons firing over and over again that caused me to have this pattern of thinking?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the brain, and especially when it comes to partitioning off information, where you could be in a position where, you know, it's not like I talk about beliefs from a purely logical, philosophical standpoint of you are either convinced of this proposition or you are not convinced of this proposition. And that's an incredibly useful way for assessing beliefs. But the real kind of what's going on in your brain thing of beliefs is that you are not always in the same concrete state of accepting or non accepting a claim. It's possible to vacillate around, I kind of lean that way. I kind of think this, and it can change from day to day and from, situation to situation. And it may just be that it gets easier over time to not vacillate so much if you kind of move to like the 63%, confidence of there's probably not a God, or I don't know where the numbers are or anything else, but I'd say give yourself some more time, maybe do a dream diary and write down other things about what's going on in your life. It might give you, it could be a good movie someday, or it might give you some insight into what's going on. It might make you realize, wow, I don't really need to spend any time thinking about this at all, or there's something important here that to dig in on.
Yeah, I've been through all the arguments, and I watched a lot of you guys' shows, and the way you guys describe your process for deconstructing has actually helped me quite a lot. So I'm pretty convinced. I went back and forth. So I've had the different arguments for why I might want to believe, and it's all a load of bullshit. I mean, there's no real reason for me to actually think that what my parents taught me growing up has any reason for being true, if that's just what their parents taught them for when they grew up, and so on and so forth, back until the first person came up with it. So, yeah.
Well, I wish you the best, Michael. Thanks for calling, and
All right.
stay.
Thank you, guys.
Take some notes. Yeah,
All right.
I have. I'm pretty sure it counts as a nightmare. The closest I come to having dreams that I remember is every now and then I'll wake up in the middle of a dream where, for some reason, I'm back in the Navy. I was in the Navy for 8.5 years. I would not go back. They would not accept me back. It's just preposterous. So there's, I guess, when you have dreams that are this ridiculous, it makes me realize that, it's kind of, obvious that your dreams don't necessarily have to make any sense or be tied to reality. But all right.
And
This
just
is,
a quick Googling, I can find at least a few other people talking about this same Ethiopian baptism rite. So apparently this has some international renown, and other people have also been knocked out by the hydrogen sulfide.
wow. I have to admit, there's a part, I mean, I want to learn more about it so that I can learn, the specific risks and everything else. There's a part of it that, setting aside any religion and setting aside, getting knocked out, sounds kind of cool. Like, I'm going to lay down and let a geyser erupt around me, and, I could
Yeah,
see where
just
that would
quickly
be
finding a
cool.
Reddit post, and it's a picture from Ethiopia, and I can see that it's written in Ethiopian or Gits, and the picture makes it almost look like it's a holier version of Splash Mountain. That kind of has that sort of imagery in my mind. But
Nice.
again, if you go to Disney World, 9 times out of 10, if you have been knocked out, someone's in trouble. Not, oh, that's just part of the ride.
Right. We have David's calling from India. He's a theist, pronouns are he, him, and he wants to make a case for prayers working on led to winning mobile games. What's going on, David?
Hey, hi. Yes.
Hi.
So there's this mobile game that I have been playing with my friends for almost 5 months. I was never able to dominate that game. When I started chanting prayers and doing meditation in the past 1 week, I was able to dominate the whole game and become number one consistently over multiple days.
Okay.
Is this to a
what are we supposed to?
particular?
Yeah.
Is this to a particular entity, or I guess I don't know enough about what your prayer practices are. Could you give us a little bit of insight?
Yeah, it's very simple. I'm from India, so over here they have a mantra called Hare Krishna and Hare Ram. They say that you should keep chanting it without any kind of expectation, and then you should proceed with whatever action you want to perform.
Okay. What if there were, so what you were like, you got to be what, number one in the world or something at this?
No, not number one in the world. No, nothing like that.
Okay. But number one, what, on a server or?
Yeah, like whenever you're competing.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes. Yeah.
So how many people are you competing against?
5.
Cool. What happens if all 5 of you do the same chants?
Yes, the match was very cutthroat.
That's not at all what I asked. I said, what if all 5 of you did the exact same chants? Like all 5 of you were chanting.
Whichever soul is in tune will reap the benefits.
In tune with what, and how can you tell?
In tune with the vibration of positive God energy.
In tune with the vibration.
What's the frequency of God? Is that 47 hertz? Is that 47.8? If you're going to say there's a frequency, I'm going to want a number on that.
Yeah, so I don't mean any specific frequency. I just mean when you utter sounds, it vibrates in your body. So that creates kind of a auspicious aura.
I don't know. You want to? I'm confused.
I'm actually confused on a few things. I guess one is if the prayer is that you're supposed to have no expectations, and now you're saying you do this to expect to win. That sounds a little bit like you're forcing the deity to do something it's not necessarily supposed to be doing. Second, of course, if I'm some sort of like master creator of the universe, I got better things to think about than who's chanting correctly so they win a mobile game amongst their friends. There seem to be other priorities I would want to take care of in this universe before that. So I would also think, could there be other reasons why I'm in the top 5 or the top person in this group of 5? Could it be the other people that you're lined up with just aren't that good this week? Maybe it's the case that they're also having a few drinks and so they're not quite fully focused. Or it could be the case that by doing the mantras that you're speaking of, that it does just allow you to have focus. And so it's irrelevant whether there's anything supernatural or not. You're just really in tune with winning that game and you're just in a great state of flow, which I hear sports players and other people get into without needing to invoke Hare Krishna or any other sort of particular mantra, deity, or supernatural entity.
Yeah, there's a lecture that I gave once talking about how prayer works. And what I talked about was if you are trapped in a cave-in underground and you pray, you will increase the chance that you will be rescued. Not because there's a deity listening to your prayer, but because the prayer will calm you down. You will not use oxygen as quickly, and this will extend the period of time that you can stay alive underground, which increases the amount of time that somebody has to rescue. So under that circumstance, the prayer, assuming it has the calming effect on you so that you're using less oxygen, contributes to an increase in a chance that you could be rescued. I don't see why it shouldn't be surprising that if you were to meditate or chant before playing a game, it might calm you enough to where you're more focused than somebody else. Are you suggesting at all, David, that your improved performance is truly because you are in tune with some God frequency? How do you tell the difference between your proposed I'm in tune with a God frequency and I'm just calmer and playing better? How do you tell the difference between those two?
Let me just, maybe I said it the wrong way, but that's what I meant, what you guys just said, that it helps you focus more, enter a flow state, and makes you concentrate more. So that's how you can go ahead of others. And if you keep practicing it, it will build up over time and it will grow exponentially. So whatever action you do, action you do will be guided by that.
Where's the evidence for that? Because you not only said it'll build up over time, but you also said that it builds up exponentially, which is huge, which means if you're winning in a small server with just a couple of your friends, in a week, you should be the world champion.
Well, actually, I can help him with that because of his talk about frequencies. If he's actually in resonance and there's no dampening, if you actually are in resonance, that the amplitude will grow exponentially. So if he's in resonance and there's no dampening, then yes, we'll have exponential growth. So that's just science.
But you need to understand that whenever you do all these like chanting mantras and everything, you can't start from a place of feeling special. You have to start from a place that you are locked up in a cabin. You are in that hell, and all you got is a book.
I'm really confused now, David, because you're suggesting that in order for the chance to be effective, you have to start with the view that you're in hell and all you've got is a book?
Yes.
What book?
You can pick anything. Bible, Quran, anything you like.
So if I'm going to start chanting Hare Krishnas, I could just take this copy of Revelation Revealed by Dr. Jack Van Impe. So now I've got a book. And then if I realize I'm in hell, I don't even know how to realize I'm in hell. What does it mean to be in hell?
You're trapped in a place with only that one book by Van Impe. That's what hell is.
If you want an objective truth, then that would be the dark web.
An objective proof would be the dark web?
Yes.
What do you think the dark web is?
I refer to those videos which only the AI sees and then does not promote anymore.
Oh. Okay. Well,
and
thanks,
that
David.
system is governed by the United States government.
Yeah, I'm having a little problem here, David, because I can't possibly take you seriously anymore. And I don't want to sit here and wait and find out if you're just a prank caller waiting to get to the punchline, or if you're serious, because neither one of them really help. So have a good day.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what to do when we start getting into the dark web is where the AI sends all the videos it doesn't want to see, and this is under control of the U.S. government. We've crossed the line. I mean, you're sitting there with an LCAR system behind you on your graphic, and it makes perfect sense to me. But what David said doesn't make any sense to me.
It seemed very much just jumping from one thing to the next, and troll or not, it was going to be difficult to actually stay with anything we might call a conversation rather than stream of consciousness and or dream sequence. And now you do have one thing you need to answer to me. Why that particular book on Revelation is anywhere near you? Like, why is that your nearby source?
Because in addition to hosting a program here on the line, which is a really good opportunity for Arden to get me the list of what's coming up on the line for this week, and I'll talk about other things like that, I produce a number of videos on my personal channel, which is patreon.com/atheistdebates, my YouTube channel. By the way, you can all go there and agree to join for even as little as $1. You'll get advanced copies of everything. This is a book that I've had for ages. It's a verse-by-verse walkthrough of the book of Revelation by Jack Van Impe. And so it is a particular take on an evangelical end times view. Also next to me, I have Charles Mackay's Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, although his name is in green, so the green screen's messing with it. I have 2 Bart Ehrman books. I also have the Voynich manuscript in a bound thing sitting right there. And I have another one. I think this is the X-ray. Yes. Whoops. Oh boy, did I just mess up my audio? We'll see if that's right.
Your audio seems fine for me.
I also have a copy of a book on Islam. One of my favorites, the X-rated Bible. It goes through by Edward Ackerley, goes through with a lot of verses of some rather strange things within the Bible, but I have them all there because these are things that I'm researching for other videos. So,
all right. So long as
I also have this.
You have better sources for interpreting Revelation.
I also have this mini atlas of snakes of the world by John Coburn, because there's lots of stuff here. All right, let's see where we're at here. Ryan in Oklahoma, pronounce he, him, is an atheist who says the hosts on the line constantly endorse an outdated model of the Big Bang. All right. Well, it seems that today's guest will be perfect for you to talk to about that. So welcome.
That's
Ryan.
why I called. Thank you very much.
See?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to Dr. Adair. I love the line. I watch pretty much all the shows on here on a regular basis, and the only thing I get some frustration with is that obviously theistic callers will often bring up the Big Bang or before the Big Bang and things like that, and I hear hosts talk about the singularity and the Planck time right after the singularity, where the physics breaks down, we kind of can't get back to. But as I'm sure Dr. Adair will confirm, we've known since, well, at least the 80s that there was no singularity. The cosmic microwave background is proof of that because of something called the horizon problem, which is that as we look out at the CMB, the temperature across it, no matter which direction we look, is very, very homogeneous, tiny, tiny local fluctuations. And that should not be possible from a singularity because those areas of the universe would have expanded away from one another faster than light and become causally disconnected. And so they would not have been able to thermally equalize. In other words, the temperatures couldn't reach a homogeneous state. You should have different temperatures in different areas. And so there could not have been a singularity. And the solution to that was something called inflation, which Dr. Adair started to bring up in a call a couple of months ago, but he didn't quite get there. Essentially, is that the Big Bang was preceded by a period of exponential inflation. Big Bang was not the start of time. Before the Big Bang, we had a small period of exponential inflation. Or actually, I'll get back to that in a second. But and in that period, the universe was cold, and all of its energy was bound up in space-time. And the Big Bang now can be properly thought of as the transition from that cold, exponentially expanding universe to the hot, dense universe we know followed the Big Bang. It's no longer the beginning, it's that transition. And the problem is we don't actually know how long inflation lasted because since it was exponential, it could theoretically extend infinitely into the past, as the size of the universe always approaches but never reaches zero. And so we can't say if there was a beginning, but we can say there was a before the Big Bang, and we can definitely say there was no singularity. Dr. Adair, do I have my facts there pretty straight?
I think there's a few things I'm going to have to contend with, because cosmic inflation and the existence or non-existence of the singularity are pretty unrelated. After all, when Alan Guth came up with the idea of cosmic inflation in 1980, it was, I think, 8 years later that Harding and Hartle and Hawking had their paper about the Big Bang singularity, which then eventually Hawking went back on. And ultimately, the idea is that there isn't a singularity, and for the sake of our audience, the singularity is the idea that basically for example, in a black hole, if you were to fall in, that you and anything else would fall in and go to a singular point that would have zero size. And this basically leads to infinite force, infinite accelerations. And anytime you do this because you're dividing by zero, it's a good sign something's wrong. Most will say now there wasn't a singularity because this is what you would get if you just project back the general theory of relativity, but we believe at such tiny scales that quantum mechanics should be coming into effect and won't even allow there to be such a state of infinite size, or of infinite tininess, that eventually you get basically that quantum uncertainty that allowed you to become that small. This is all separate from cosmic inflation, which, as you were explaining, does help explain why there is a rather nice uniformity in the cosmic microwave background that was a problem that Guth was trying to explain in his hypothesis from 1980. And as for what was before the Big Bang, yeah, that's there's only one thing that came before the Big Bang, and that's a giant question mark.
Well, my understanding was that, and I'm getting a lot of my information here from several pieces by Ethan Siegel in The Big Think. And my understanding from that is that inflation had to be before the Big Bang, because the Big Bang, that moment of transition, if we had not already have that exponentially inflating universe, then you would have that horizon problem. That the only way you get away from the horizon problem is if inflation precedes the Big Bang.
Well, it ultimately is, part of this is going to depend on what is even the cause of inflation, which is an active question on what quantum field is responsible for that, and why is it that this quantum field is also not driving the universe apart at an exponential rate like it did very, very early on in the universe. Was there inflation before the universe? Also, I don't think that's something we can demonstrate, and we also can't project it infinitely far in the past. So, for example, this is a theorem that unfortunately comes up mostly by William Lane Craig, but he is correct in citing it on this point. The Guth-Valenden-Vilenka, I'm getting the names mixed up, but the theorem that basically, thank you. That theorem based on classical relativity, basically ignoring quantum mechanics, that the inflation state can't be projected back infinitely into the past, that it has to have some sort of starting point. Now, Craig will come along and say, well, that proves the beginning of the universe. And everyone else is saying, no, that's just the beginning of inflation. The universe and inflation aren't the same thing. And not to mention, you could also just have it that that's the beginning of inflation, but before that was maybe something in the opposite direction. And then that could be projected back infinitely. So imagine that. Christian apologist is wrong about physics. I've never seen that before. But yeah, I do want to distinguish a few of those things, and at least my understanding of where that's at. And of course, this all depends on if inflation is real or not. I would say most cosmologists will say inflation is something real, but it's not something we have as strong of evidence of as we do, for example, the Big Bang itself, the afterglow of the Big Bang. That we have great evidence for. Inflation explains a number of things, but we don't have the knockout evidence that we really wish we could have, even though we thought we did about 10 years ago, and then we found out what was causing that measurement was actually cosmic dust. Oops.
Right. I mean, obviously it's not the slam dunk that the Big Bang is, but from my understanding, it best fits the evidence we have. But getting back to, I don't feel like you addressed, if inflation did not precede the Big Bang, then how do you get away from the horizon problem?
That you would basically have inflation very early on in the universe, basically within, I'd have to go back and see what the time frames are,
Like
but
10 to the negative
usually I will
32
see that
seconds or
inflation,
something.
I think even much, much less than 2 seconds. It's a very small fraction of a second that inflation locally took place. And I have to say locally, because one of the other things that Guth's version of inflation suggests that actually inflation has locally stopped, but it can continue to act on elsewhere. And so universes are popping into existence all the time. And because of that effect of inflation, they're also zipping away from each other, so they never bounce into each other. But you basically have a universe creating machine out of nothing, effectively, and is continuously happening. And it's one of the things that would suggest the existence of a multiverse.
Right. I just a clarification. I said 10 to the negative 32. So decimal point, 32 zeros and 1.
I'm sorry.
Two,
I only heard
obviously,
2. I only heard 2 seconds, and I
No,
was like,
that's okay.
it was much less than 2 seconds.
No, that's okay. I
Yeah,
shouldn't have talked over you. That was the problem. But my confusion is still that if you had the Big Bang, if you had the synthesis of all that matter, and that moment creates all of that heat, even if the inflation is very rapidly after that, it doesn't solve the horizon problem. You still have that problem unless you already had an exponentially inflating universe that had done so for a brief period before all of that matter came about with the Big Bang.
Honestly, I don't see how that could be, because as inflation, I don't know how you would, if there's nothing there, then what's inflating? That's kind of an odd thing. I mean, the whole point is that inflation is there to take some tiny patch of space-time and then blow it out to gargantuan sizes in such a tiny fraction of a second. It shouldn't even be called inflation. It should be called explosion. It's just so rapid. It's absurdly fast. But you have to have space-time to inflate to even get that effect. If the inflation is happening before there's space-time, there's nothing to inflate there. So, and
right.
I should also note
I'm not saying it happened before space-time.
Particle physicists will try to interpret the cause of the inflation because of some sort of phase change early on in the universe. So when I say a phase change, just like when you have changes in states of matter, that actually will have some sort of energy requirement or energy released in that process. You get these phase changes that may have happened very early on in the universe, and so some quantum field is basically releasing some bazongos amounts of energy that flattens out the universe nicely, which again requires quantum fields and it requires space-time for this to act in. So really, inflation just has to exist within our universe for it to give us the observations that we're trying to explain.
Right. So it was in the universe, and there was space-time. In fact, the idea of it is that inflation was the inflation of space-time, but it was a cold universe where all of the energy was bound up in the fabric of space-time, and that the Big Bang is not a moment before that. It is the moment of transition from that to the matter-dominated, hot, dense universe that followed. That's how I understand it, and my understanding is that
the Big Bang is basically everything that's happening after the earliest moments of the universe, because at moment zero, we just have to say we don't know. If you say there's cold matter there,
we don't.
We can't say we know that. That, in fact, I'm not even familiar with which hypothesis says that necessarily. All I can say is whatever was before the first 10 to the minus 42 seconds, that absurdly small amount of time, there's just a question mark, and before that, a long series of question marks. And I will not claim anything beyond that, other than there are many models. Models are a bit dime a dozen about explaining what happened before then, even if there is possible to talk about a before. Because anytime we talk about before time begins, my brain melts a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Ryan, are you claiming that the common kind of adage of before the Big Bang is something that's actually sensible?
Well, yes, because the Big Bang wasn't a time zero. It wasn't the start to time. That's an outdated view. The current most accepted model is that.
I'm trying to make sure I understand this. I'm trying to make sure I understand this, because my understanding is that the instant at which we cannot go back and view prior to Planck time, at whatever point inflation begins, that is when, prior to that, talking about space-time is nonsensical.
Well,
Like
but
there's no
that's the whole
space or
point.
time.
Yeah, that's the whole point, is that the Big Bang is not a point where space and time began. The Big Bang came along. It was a moment of transition. We already
It's
had a
where
universe.
space-time
It was a
expanded,
universe.
but time as we map it in our universe, that's the 0 point.
Right, but what I'm saying is,
Right.
well, for one thing, we don't know that there was a 0 point, because we just don't. But for another thing, the Big Bang is not that point. Even in the traditional sense, that the Big Bang, there was already a universe with time and space, and there was inflation, and we don't know how long that inflation lasted, because only the last 10 to the negative 32 seconds left a signature on our universe. And then the Big Bang happens, and we go from this cold, exponentially inflating universe where there's no matter, but there's energy bound up in the fabric of space-time. And the Big Bang is a moment of transition from that to the hot, dense universe we know. So you had a universe, you had time and space, and then the Big Bang is a moment where we transition from one of those states to the other.
What can you tell me? What can you tell me? What can you tell me about that universe, time and space that existed prior to the expansion?
All I can tell you from what I've read is that it was cold, that the energy of the universe was bound up in space-time itself, and it was exponentially inflating. And it lasted for at least like 10 to the negative 32 seconds in order for the math, getting rid of the horizon problem, to work. That's it. That's all we know, because only that tiny little piece of it left any signature in the cosmic microwave background for us to find. And there's nothing else there. So it's still a question mark. It's just, you kind of move the Big Bang to be after inflation instead of being before.
Yeah, I think was also one other thing worth noting is there's two ways that Big Bang might get used, that more incorrectly being used to talk about like the first instant of the universe of time 0, and yeah, that we don't have a physics theory for that, and so that's not really what the Big Bang can describe. But more generally, the Big Bang is basically the earliest moments of the universe, moments plural, and inflation is basically a part of the Big Bang. It's not before or after, it's basically a phase of the Big Bang, that you basically have the initial banging, an exponential growth to it, and then a more non-exponential growth after that point. And it's that exponential portion that stretched out space-time, so that way we get this pretty uniform cosmic microwave background. So it's really weird. I've never heard anyone ever say that the Big Bang was after inflation. Inflation is basically a modification to the Big Bang theory, not something that happened before the Big Bang.
Right. Well, I can get you the piece by Ethan Siegel, or pieces, where he explains it, because he's obviously on your level. He's an astrophysicist, and I'm not. But I still kind of don't. The question I feel like hasn't been fully drilled down on is, if the Big Bang is when matter came into being, unless we're suggesting that in the Planck time there still was no matter, and that was like the universe was still cold and all of that.
So, all right, so that's also like a later phase of the whole process. Then you're talking about nucleosynthesis, baryosynthesis at that point. And yeah, that's later. That's after the universe had cooled down enough for atoms, or at least nuclei of atoms, to form. But this is, I guess, all a matter of how long you want the phase of the Big Bang to last. If you want it to be, if you want it specifically to baryosynthesis and call that the Big Bang, I think that's just a little bit odd, in that I usually see the Big Bang as incorporating the earliest expansion phases of the universe, and that the cosmic microwave background is what we expect from that.
I'm not actually talking about baryosynthesis. I'm not talking about when nucleus is formed and it cooled. I'm talking about when you first started to see even the most basic subatomic particles. So before you would have had like nucleuses, when you just had those things. But again, I I think maybe the thing to do would for me to send you the piece that I'm getting this from, because it's coming from an astrophysicist, and he is pretty insistent that that inflation had to come before. And I've also had other experts that in Facebook groups I'm in on, like the James Webb Telescope, who are themselves people with physics degrees and stuff, confirm that the Big Bang now does not mean the sort of colloquial beginning that we used to think, but rather is that moment of transition from inflation to the hot dense universe. And so I don't know. It's odd to me that you say you've never heard that, because I don't know. I see it a lot of places, but I also see the more traditional thing a lot of places too. So I don't know, but let me. Is there a way
What
I can
difference
get a link
does any
to
of
you?
this make? What difference does any of this make, for example, to how I have conversations about people using cosmological arguments and claiming that a God exists outside of space and time?
Okay, so because a lot of those theists get hung up on the idea of a singularity. For one of the reasons is because of what Dr. Adair mentioned, that when you get to those zeros, it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Haven't I said repeatedly for years that the singularity is not a thing, may have always been a universe, and that this is just about the expansion of the universe?
I don't know that I've heard you say that, but I could be wrong. If you say that, then I believe you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that there's a whole bunch that we don't know. You are fixated on some pedantic point between 10 to the minus 23rd and the Planck time, which would be 10 to the minus 43rd, of what we can and can't say about the universe. But how does that have any impact on whether or not there was or wasn't time for an agent to act to do this?
Well, I think that when we talk about the Big Bang and we talk about not being able to go back before the Planck time and there being a time zero, we don't know that there was a time zero. We can't say that there was a time zero. And,
Correct.
And that's what this is about. And so to me, like when we say, well, you know, for example, when we say there's no such thing as before the Big Bang because that was time zero.
Do you think that because we know and we have an understanding of our inability to look back beyond a single Planck unit, aren't we talking about an inferred time zero, and a Planck unit beyond that is where we can actually start investigating? Isn't the inference a T0, and the first moment after the inferred T0 that which we can start investigating mathematically is a Planck unit?
Right, but what I'm saying is I don't think we can infer a T0. So our starting point is wrong.
How can you have Planck, a Planck unit, and say this is as close as we can get to this, and not infer a T0? I mean, that's
the point of what I'm saying, is that if inflation came before the Big Bang and not after, then the Planck unit, the idea of the Planck unit, no longer makes sense, because we do know we can go to the Big Bang and we can go to just the 10 to the negative 32 before that. And we don't know what came before that, whether it was a Planck unit, whether it was a true singularity, like we don't know. But again, there's no T0.
No, there is a T0. That doesn't mean that there was no time prior to that. You can put a T0 anyway. T0 for the start of the hang up was 6 p.m. plus or minus, whatever. That's T0. T0 is something that we affix to things in order for relativistic assessments. So our inference is that since we can't go back further than a Planck unit and explore in any finer detail, that's the smallest unit that we can investigate. It's an inference that the mathematics will break down at T0 plus Planck unit. It doesn't matter that we can't know that whether or not time started there, but the model is based on that inference that is T0.
Right, but if you're saying there's no such thing as before the Big Bang, because the Big Bang was T0. Now you're not talking about an arbitrary thing you've decided is 0. You're actually talking about a hard beginning, and we don't know that there was such a thing. And so that's
we don't
what
know
I'm
that there
talking
we
about.
don't know that there wasn't. And so if we're going to infer that the model of time as we understand it breaks down, then what time could be before that?
Well, I'm saying I don't see sufficient evidence to infer that.
You don't see sufficient evidence. You don't see sufficient evidence that that time breaks down at what we're inferring as T0. Cool. What evidence do you have of time? What evidence do you have of time at the inferred T0 or prior to that?
I'm saying there is no inferred T0. It's the premise that I'm disagreeing with.
There is an inferred T0. That is an undeniable fucking fact.
Okay. Are you talking about
this inference is, it doesn't mean that I just went through this. It doesn't mean that time began there. We can't say anything at all about prior to this because we can't investigate in finer units than that. But it's not that the inferred T0 does not, I'm not in any way saying time necessarily begins here. I'm saying this is the point at which the math related to time breaks down. Is that incorrect?
My understanding, and I thought Dr. Adair confirmed this when we were talking about it, is that we don't know that time breaks down. We don't know that there ever was a moment where time broke down. So,
I didn't say time breaks down. I said the math related to time breaks down. If we don't know, then it may in fact be nonsensical to say before the Big Bang or before T0. If you have something else, you would have to demonstrate that you have a model that includes time prior to that in a sensible way, right?
I think that the problem here is that we're having some different definitions and whatnot, because I'm not sure how to put this.
I think the problem here is
I think what I can say if I can try to be of help here, that we actually might even not be able to say T = 0 is a physical point in time, because we don't know how quantum mechanics will act in that. Because if you basically are setting this time = 0 for the beginning of the universe as some sort of boundary condition, and then you are within a Planck length or Planck time of that we basically don't know what happens there, and it might lead to absurd results. So basically our math breaks down in such a way that we don't even know how to describe that with that condition. And so it's either that there's something wrong with our fundamental physics, which we think there is because we don't have quantum gravity, or it's not even possible to have this T = 0, that it just becomes actually nonsensical in some sort of other way. So it's an open question, though intuitively it seems more easy to believe there is a time = 0, that there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just that we don't have mathematics that can describe what happens at that time.
Right.
Or if there is time, this is what, wow. All right, well, we'll just leave it there, since that pretty much sums up what I was talking about, and you were saying right. So we'll just leave it there.
Okay. Well,
thanks, Ryan.
Is there a way I can send this link to specifically to Dr. Adair? And Matt, if you want to read it, it's pretty easy and pretty accessible.
That'll be really helpful.
Well, it's a astrophysicist.
By the way,
read it.
Ryan, very quickly, the stuff that you found, is this on medium.com? Because when I looked up Ethan Siegel, I found several articles by him on Medium.
Yeah, he's also got stuff in Forbes. But yeah, he's an astrophysicist and science writer.
Yeah,
I
saw that when I typed that in, and I found his Wikipedia page to basically give his bona fides, and PhD from University of Florida. Okay, I'll believe it.
Okay, I think I'm sure you're capable of finding his article just by Googling "inflation precedes Big Bang." But if you want, I can send you a link as well.
I can do that so long as I can figure out how to spell proceed, because every time I do that, I screw up.
Okay, well,
I can do
sorry
science,
if I
but I
was
can't spell.
frustrating that. Sorry if I was frustrating it. For whatever reason, it made more sense when Dr. Adair said it. So I apologize that I was frustrating to you. I didn't mean to be.
No, it's fine. We're talking past it. Neither one of us are physicists. I'll leave it alone.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, you guys have a great night. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers. Thanks. I'm glad it's accessible. That'll come in handy. All right, here we go. Yes, sir. No, I was saying, whom? I'm talking to you. It sounded like you had something you were
okay.
You wanted to address.
I think I might have found one of the articles he was talking about. Though very quickly, one, there's a lot of images that I think helps make clear what inflation is supposed to be doing. So the article I found is "What Was It Like When Cosmic Inflation Occurred?" By Ethan Siegel, and it's freely accessible from what I can tell. So I can't go and read it in detail right now, but I can say that almost certainly it's going to be close to what the consensus is amongst astrophysicists. So it's almost certainly got good stuff to read.
Yeah, it's wild because you'll get, in the theistic, realm of discussions, it's wild because a good chunk of them aren't going to accept any version of Big Bang cosmology anyway. They don't really care that much. They've got this notion that there's an actual agent that is the creator, governor, sustainer, whatever. And when you listen to someone like Craig, I mean, my favorite debate ever with Craig was the one where Sean Carroll basically showed a video or a clip from, I think it was Alan Guth, basically saying Craig doesn't understand my model. Was the colloquial version of that was,
Yes.
he keeps talking about my model, but he doesn't seem to understand it because even I can't, I look at my model and I can't answer that question. And so actually I had a really good friend of mine who died a couple of years ago, he was a physicist named Mark Lowy, who worked with Weinberg here at University of Texas and actually wrote one of the quantum mechanics textbooks that are used. And so he was my go-to guy for everything related to physics and Big Bang cosmology and things like that. He was actually working with some other scientists on an entirely different model that would compete with the standard Big Bang cosmological model. But in his tentative research with these guys, the math was actually working out slightly better. And I don't know enough. I have some of his old papers, but I don't know enough to say exactly what was working out or what was different about it or whatever else. And it's so sad to me that he died before, I wanted to get him on the show to present, hey, here's this alternate model, because I think there's value in letting people know, yes, we have a Big Bang cosmological model, and yet it doesn't provide all of the answers. It is the best mathematical model that we currently have to that fits the data. And like Ryan was saying, and you were confirming, basically, prior to the Planck time, there's just a big question mark. I think there's, a reasonable inference that, in a colloquial sense, maybe not in a math sense, we can call that T0. We can do T0 for anything. Launch, when we're counting down to launch a spaceship, we're counting down to a T0 type thing. Whether or not time began there is another question. And my understanding is that what we have is that prior to that time, the math relating to space and time just break down, and we don't have a sensible model that where time or even space can truly mean anything prior to that time. Not necessarily there is no time or there is no space, because am I wrong that the view is that that the universe likely existed Well, I see one of the temptations to say it's always existed, and what we're describing with Big Bang cosmology is a change, an expansion, and that it always existed. But it even always is a temporal statement. And if time actually
Mhm.
began at the inferred T0, then of course it always existed because it existed at that inferred T0, and it's nonsensical to talk about before T0. Is there, and you may not know, is there a mathematical model that would essentially, for lack of a better term, describe meta time in like a multiversal sense, where there's a whole separate time, and it pops out bubble universes that contain their own space time, and so there would be like a meta time for that.
uh, don't know specifically about a meta time, but it does remind me of a different model that Sean Carroll has described. It was a model that he and one of his graduate students did. So it's the Chen Carroll model. And basically, at the Big Bang, you actually have time going in opposite directions from that point. There's for our universe, and basically what would look like before our universe, where the arrow of time points in the opposite direction. And so, from our point of view, that universe is shrinking down and its entropy is decreasing while ours is increasing. But for the observers in that other universe, everything just looks mirror reversed. And it's as far as I know, a consistent model for that to work. Is it the right model? I don't know, but it basically creates a sort of past infinite scenario. And
I,
yeah, it's hard to prove.
are you an A theory or B theory of time proponent, or do you even have a preference?
Oh, well, from what I understand, A theory isn't even consistent with special relativity, so it's done. And when I've
Okay.
seen people like Bill Craig try to defend A theory, he basically has to find like the fringe three physicists who somehow still believe in some sort of ether to make an absolute temporal frame to make A theory work. And I'm just like, nah, dog, I'm good.
And Art and I were sitting around talking about this the other day. I'm going to get to more calls here in just a second. So if you're online, especially for the Theist College, you're up next. So basically, my understanding of the difference between A theory and B theory of time is that A theory is that time is something that actually moves, and each individual moment, if you could have discrete moments, is one right after the other. And B theory is that everything has just happened, and it's our perception of it that is moving. And so that's what gives this the illusion of structure to time, but that there isn't a progress of time. Is that close enough, or
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
and I think
refine
one
that?
of the things that A theory is supposed to make it more plausible to us is that in A theory you have a flow of time, which kind of matches our intuitions that the future flows into the past, and the future isn't real until it's the present, and then once the present's over, it's done. But with the B theory and that block sort of universe that it creates, everything past, future, present exist all at once. But that's also the only thing that's consistent with special relativity, because one of the things with special relativity is that we don't actually agree on when things happen. We don't agree on things being simultaneous. We don't even necessarily agree on the order of events depending on how we're moving from each other. I can be in a
Yeah,
frame of reference moving past you, and it looks like a bullet enters your gun, and then you pull the trigger. And
yeah.
of course, from your point of view, it doesn't quite work that way. Uh,
It's
and
this to
yeah,
me.
those sorts of
Arden was immediate. Like when we were discussing it, we were running through kind of simplistic, because we're neither of us are physicists. Simplistic comparisons of A theory and B theory of time, and the one of the things is that how would you ever tell? I mean, generally, the normal person's whether it's the perception that's moving, or the time that's actually moving, what is the thing that tells, or that would allow you to tell? And right off the bat, she was like, "Yeah, but." She just kind of looked at me and said something about relativity, and I was like, "Yes!" And I was all excited because this was the exact same point that I got to, that I it has to be B theory of time in order for the basics of relativity to make any sense. And we're just sitting here. This is the part of the science that it's like, maybe I'm just weird in what I choose to get excited about, because let's there's no secret. I found the bits and pieces of what you and Ryan were discussing interesting, but not exciting. and yet the notion of A theory and B theory time changing people's perception of even causality, that to me is, an exciting thing to dig in on. So I was curious as to where you were. I suspected that I would have gotten the right answer, but yeah, it's good to know. By the way, for those of you who don't know
the right
anything,
answer.
well, I would have got the right answer as to where you were. Not that it's the right answer, but if I had to guess as to whether you were a proponent of A or B, then I would have guessed B. So that's what I mean when I say I would have got the right answer there. If you're not familiar with that type of stuff, there are some really good videos you can go watch that'll go through a lot of the A and B theory of time stuff. All right, we have a bunch of callers.
If I also could throw in one more little anecdote with this as well, because when it comes to tests between A and B theory, what if I also told you Bill Craig accidentally found a way to disprove A theory in his particular model of it?
Really?
So you might have remembered about 10, 15 years ago at the Large Hadron Collider, one of the experiments there was saying, hey, we're detecting neutrinos going faster than the speed of light. And there was a lot of hubbub about what was causing this unusual measurement because, most people didn't want to say general relativity or special relativity was just thrown out the window. But in one of the blog articles from Bill Craig, he said actually on his model, physics models that he was adapting that would make special relativity fit with an A theory of time, it would allow for superluminal particles like neutrinos going faster than the speed of light, which means, there's an observational difference between your theories. And guess what? We eventually did find out what the reason we were detecting neutrinos going faster than the speed of light. One of the timing cables was a bit loose and adding a couple nanoseconds to the measurements that were screwing things up. So,
wow.
Unfortunately, there is now an empirical difference. It means, hey, we have been looking for these superluminal particles. We haven't found them. That's at least some empirical evidence against the already implausible setup that requires basically a whole nother layer on top of reality, which doesn't conform to at least this observation. So once again, Bill Craig happened to put down a rake and stepped on it.
Wow. Well, as the resident non-physicist debater in the room, I wasn't worried about debating Bill anyway, but that's good to know. He refuses to debate me, but that's okay. We have a number of theistic callers here, and so I think we're about to get into a number of different topics. Some of them are going to be way in your wheelhouse or your wheelhouses, and one or two of them might just be bits of curiosity. But Matt in England is a theist who has a proof that God made the universe. So welcome, Matt. What's your proof that God made the universe?
That's not exactly what I said, and I wouldn't really call myself a theist.
I'm sorry.
Someone who knows.
Matt, I'm sorry. It says here, it has you listed as a theist, so you're convinced that a God exists, right?
Well, no, I'm kind of similar to an atheist, except I know there is one more God than you think there is.
Okay. Wow. I don't know why this is so difficult. Are you convinced that some God exists?
Yeah, I know for a fact, yeah.
Okay. Then you're a theist. So I don't know why you turned to that. I don't know why you're turning that into a thing. Do you actually want to have a conversation, or are you just here to be kind of all your script? Because I'm not going to have much patience for that, because you say that one proof that God made the universe is that women automatically know there is one God, but they hide it. Is that what you're calling it? Okay. So please
you guys typically ask for one proof that there is
stop
one God.
talking over me.
No.
Please stop talking over me. Please make your case that women automatically know there is a God and that they hide it.
I don't need to. You can find it when you go home and talk to your wife.
Okay, you're clearly not for real. Goodbye. Matt's pronoun was king, he said, which isn't a pronoun at all. And that is someone who is clearly not actually interested in demonstrating the things that they claim. It is beyond absurd, into the realm of stupidity, to say that women automatically know that there is one God, but they hide it, and that this is in fact proof of a creator God, and then to do absolutely nothing but say, hey, you can just go home and ask your wife, hey, honey, do you know that there's a God and you hide it?
Nope.
Boom. Proved you wrong, King. Try something else. Sweet. Here we go with, oh boy, it's that kind of night. Elijah in Texas says that anti-theism is bigoted. So what?
Hey, Matt. How's it going?
What's the
How you
problem?
doing, Matt?
How are you defining anti-theism, and what's the problem with it?
Well, that's my question. Are you an anti-theist?
I'm asking you how you're defining anti-theism, because depending on your definition, I may or may not qualify. So how you're the one that has asserted anti-theism is bigoted. I need you to tell me what you mean by anti-theism.
I go off of Merriam-Webster definitions usually.
Okay, so I should just hang up on you and go read the definition because you are being a smug prick again, like the last 2 times we talked?
Apparently.
Cool. Bye, bitch.
Man, this is going to be a short night.
I know, it's so wild. I'm pulling these people up and genuinely giving them their shot to defend what it is that they're believing and claiming. But instead, they're going to cop an attitude because things didn't go that well for them the last time. So, depending on which dictionary you might use, anti-theism might be merely opposition to theism, one who is opposed to the belief in the existence of God. Now, evidently, crybaby Elijah thinks that this is bigoted. I don't know how being opposed to an ism is bigoted. I can understand how being opposed to people could be bigoted, or a particular category of people, but theism is a category of belief, not of people. Theist would be a category of people, the people who believe in a God. And I'm not opposed to those people or their rights. I actually support their rights to believe as their conscience dictates. What a shame that Elijah just, maybe one of the other theists we've got, because they're definitely interested in having conversations with you, and so that's cool. John P. in Washington pronounces him as a theist, wanting to address explanations and probabilities regarding the existence of innate universal constants without an intelligent design. So, John P., you're on with Dr. Aron Adair.
Hey guys, hope you guys are having an okay night.
Yeah, not bad. I'm glad there's callers that aren't little trolls.
So I guess it was more of a question initially for Professor Adair, but whoever wants to answer it. And again, I'm out over my skis on this subject matter with you both. I'm more of a astrophysicist for people in a hurry kind of book person. But I do find it interesting, just in looking at what I've seen, just related to universal constants and trying to find. I know the multiverse has somewhat of a explanation. It's almost like a Drake equation for the multi-universes to explain the probability of these constants being correct here. But I was curious from Professor Adair what he thought about that subject matter.
Well, first thing I should probably note is that I do not deserve the title of professor. I have taught in universities, but I do not currently possess that title. So I want to only give that to those who are currently deserving of that recognition. But that's a minor point. As for the constants, I find a few issues with even the approach of it, because if you are telling me, ultimately it's like a question of, well, what are the chances that the various constants of the universe would have been that particular value? And I say, yeah, what are the chances? Because quite literally, if the values can be anything from negative infinity to positive infinity, or just from 0 to positive infinity, you literally cannot tell me what the probability that is going to be in some particular range. It actually is not mathematically possible to define a probability distribution like that. So to me, I'm just like, you first need to start and realize that you can't actually tell me what that probability is, let alone what our values are, is improbable. That's just like a starting point. It's like, hey, we can't even get off the bus and say we're in improbability land.
Okay.
And I know that sounds a little bit hand wavy, but to this is actually something that even comes up like literally in a first year quantum mechanics book. If you tried writing the Schrodinger equation to describe an electron without any barriers, so just an electron that can be anywhere between negative infinity and positive infinity. If you try working out the math and figuring out the normalization constants for it, you get nonsense and you realize, oh, it's not even possible to describe a single electron in completely empty space. It just literally breaks down. It's the same sort of thing with these constants. If you have nothing that actually limits what values those constants can have, then there's no probability distribution that you have, and there's no way you can talk about something being improbable. You literally cannot describe what is likely or unlikely for those values to take.
Mm-hmm. And then if I could ask then a follow-up, then maybe, and again, keep in mind, this is not my field or even close to it. Isn't that somewhat the objective of the multiverse, is to, I feel like I've read that, where these constants are differently tuned, so therefore life may or may not be possible in these different verses, and we happen to just live in the one that is almost ideal. Am I wrong about that general thought?
There's a multiplicity of things, because if there is a multiverse and the constants can take different values in each one of those universes, and the fact that the multiverse can basically explode into potentially infinitely many universes, then it goes from improbable or seems hard to believe to an inevitability that you will have a universe with the right constants. So that is one thing that the multiverse hypothesis could do. But you also mentioned something else that with the what's often called the anthropic principle, or at least the weak version. If the constants were different, that we weren't here to observe it, well, we wouldn't be here. So we can only exist in the universes where life could have emerged. Now, this actually leads to a different problem, which I'm going to now blow your mind. Fine-tuning is actually evidence against theism. I will say that again. Fine-tuning is actually evidence against theism, and here's why. What is the expected probability that you would see a universe where life is consistent with the laws of that universe? On naturalism, on no God theism.
Ooh.
Okay.
And that probability is 100%. Life existing where life is possible from the laws of nature is exactly what you expect on naturalism. Conversely, on theism, what possible universe could have life in it? Any possible, because God is not constrained by the laws of physics. So the fact that we live in a universe where it's physically possible for us to exist is 100% expected on naturalism, and is not expected necessarily on theism or supernaturalism. So the more fine-tuned the universe has to be, the more tight those constraints have to be in what values they can take, then that basically means more and more and more space that is allowed by theism that's impossible on atheism, but we only exist in the universe that's consistent with atheism. So strangely enough, fine-tuning actually leads to the opposite conclusion.
I see your point, other than I suppose, unless one would say the fine-tuning is God's will. It's not like he, if he created the thing.
But now you have to posit not just
God,
but a very specific kind of God. And once you've done that, you've made the God hypothesis improbable, because you've now had to add things on top of it. You say not just God exists, but God exists and will do everything he can to make everything look like there is no God being necessary. That is a very, 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 very specific form of theism, and that is not as probable as just naked theism. It's theism with a whole lot of extra layers. Which means inherently your hypothesis becomes less probable to make it fit there. While on atheism, it's good as gravy. I don't know if that's actually a phrase, but I'm going to make it my phrase now.
Okay. Good as gravy. Got it. Okay. Oh, I appreciate, like I said, I'm a bit over my skis on this subject matter, but I wanted to hear, you actually gave me something to look into a little bit. So I appreciate that.
Me too, John.
Thanks
for calling.
Well, you guys have a good night. Okay.
You too.
Yep.
Good night to you.
Let me get a couple of announcements out of the way, and we got some more callers. This is the This is not the Transatlantic College Show. This is the Line Network, and in addition to my show on Wednesday nights, The Hang Up, and thank you, Dr. Adair, for joining me this week for that. There are other shows on this network that are way better and way more important, not the least of which is the Transatlantic Collins Show, which will air tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central with Luxander and Arden Hart, the beautiful and talented voice that comes in and corrects me on things and chimes in on whether or not she knew that there was a God. On Sunday, the Sunday show will be myself and Seth Andrews. So we're going to be having some fun on Sunday. Sunday show after dark is going to be Jimmy Snow and Eve Was Framed. On Monday, Skeptalk with Shannon Q and Erika Gibbon. That should be Gibson or Gibbons.
That's a Gibbon, not no Gibbons and not Gibson. Gibbon, like like the ape.
There's a type. No, there's not a typo. My glasses were off. Erika Gibbon and Shannon Q will be on Skip Talk on Monday. Tuesdays, Chewed Gum's going to be Eve Was Framed and Alyssa Ljub. And next Wednesday's Hang Up, we have a guest that's to be determined. There are a bunch of callers that I want to get to, but we have a return caller here. So Elijah is calling back from Texas with pronouns he, him. Elijah, it says here that you say you see beauty in most religious traditions. Is that correct? Hello?
Elijah, are you muted?
I'm gonna put you back in the queue. We'll try that again in a minute. We'll see how that goes. We also have, is it Aubrey? I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, from South Africa.
Yes, Aubrey. Yes,
Aubrey.
That's fine.
Welcome.
Yep.
You wanted to talk about the standard model of particle physics, so go right ahead. I will let you dig in with Dr. Adair.
Okay. So I'm coming from a computer programming perspective, and so I've been looking at the standard model for a while, and when you look at it, you can see you've got these 17 particles, and they interact very selectively according to rules and so on. And so looking at from a systems perspective, it seems highly designed. To write a program to actually simulate it would be quite a task. And so I have become convinced that it must be designed, because I cannot see how a system like this could come about spontaneously. So I just wanted to know
So this doesn't really require much physics knowledge. You're basically just saying that looks complicated, therefore designed. Honestly, it being hyper complicated with 17 different fundamental particles, that sounds not designed. That sounds like, at best, a bunch of kludges from a bunch of engineers who are just barely trying to get this thing to work. If this was to be with any sort of engineering description. At the very least, you say you come from a computer science background. I can't believe that this is normally what you would expect for any sort of push to a GitHub repo, this sort of weird code. Like, what's the point of neutrino oscillations? Like, what was the purpose for that in particular? I'm just thinking of.
Well, I can't comment on that, but looking at the system, it seems in a way asymmetric. So you've got quarks interacting with gluons, and it seems to be able to create atoms and protons and neutrons, and so there seems to be a very specific design so that you have sort of these Lego-like blocks that will be able to click together. So if you look at the design, it really looks like a Lego type design, and then if you look at the universe, you see everything is basically built from electrons and quarks. That's really suspicious. And so if all the interactions were symmetric,
tell me this:
flat,
what would it look like if it wasn't suspicious? Because we have these fundamental particles that then fit together to make everything else more complicated. What would a not created thing look like?
You would expect something flat that's absolutely symmetric, no special interactions. You wouldn't expect.
Whoa! No spatial interactions, and you want to get a universe? How does that work?
Well, that's why I say it's designed, that there's a purpose. It's like if you look at your
No,
computer
I'm just
screen,
saying, like, you're saying that basically you are now claiming by that the only way you can actually have like things in space and time is if it's created. So really, this is just an argument boiling down to I can't think otherwise, therefore created. And that's just not even the beginning of a scientific hypothesis.
well, no, I would say it's like if you look at your computer screen, fundamentally behind it is ones and zeros and how it interacts. But at a higher level, you see windows and programs and so on. That complexity is there, but it's designed in a very specific way to give a very specific outcome. Or to put it differently, if I find tennis rackets and a tennis ball, I can see it's made for each other. There's a interaction there. The ball was made like the gluons hold the quarks together, and specifically, it looks like only that. So that's very suspicious. So
I don't find that
obviously
suspicious at all.
designed.
And also, let's take this example of the zeros and ones becoming the building blocks for everything else. So the reason we use zeros and ones is that it allows us this very simple way of doing these computations. So then I have to ask this: why is it that at the base level for the universe, it's not zeros and ones? There are over a dozen different subatomic particles, these fundamental particles. One would think if we are going to be these engineers and have everything built out from the way you're describing like binary code, why aren't we using binary? Why are we using not even hexadecimal?
Yeah, because it seems that possibly the universe is a simulation, but not running in a computer.
But why not
it
binary?
Looks like,
why not binary?
Because the information you're storing is more complex, and you're storing it inside.
No, that doesn't actually help you at all. Making it more complex isn't going to be. It's not less complex by being in binary. It actually allows all sorts of utilities. We are building simulations now using binary. We don't need hexadecimal numbers to do computer programming.
Yeah, but our simulations cannot scale to a universe size, right? So if you want to scale to a universe size... Well,
tell me what simulation does. Because there's an interesting thing about simulations of a universe. Do you know how big of a computer you need to simulate a universe?
Oh,
no,
can I guess
massive.
it's bigger?
You need a universe. You need a computer as big as the universe or bigger to simulate that universe. So if you're saying the universe is simulated, that means that computer has to be even bigger than the universe. And I think that doesn't make the problem any better for you.
But
yeah,
I was going to jump. Hang on.
Okay, sorry,
I was going to jump in at the start, and then Aaron got to where I was going, which is if you listen to what you said at the beginning, you say it suspiciously looks designed, or you just can't imagine how it's not designed. And Aaron's made this point, but I kind of want to hammer it home a little bit. Can you give an example of a model where whether or not Aubrey is convinced or can think of another answer is itself sufficient to reasonably conclude that the proposed answer is correct? That's what I thought. Okay, you can continue.
Yeah, sorry, Matt, I can't think so quickly on that example. Yeah, I think the universe, you get different kinds of simulations, right? You get physical simulations that doesn't really run in the computer. They used to do that before computers came around. And the universe seems to be more of a physical simulation where you store the information in the particle itself. So
wait. Are you trying to explain the laws of physics with the laws of physics?
No, I'm just trying to
You basically said this computer is a physical computer. Congratulations, you've gotten us nowhere.
It also seems like you are doing your best to argue from analogies. Like the universe is analogous to this, therefore my understanding of this can be expanded to the universe. And that's just fallacious. Analogies are going to break down at some point. And so, Aaron was already talking about how you'd need a computer the size of the universe or bigger in order to simulate it. So that's a big problem with simulation model. on all of these other fronts, I'm wondering, apart from just you can't think of a way that it could exist not being in the, or that you can't imagine that it existed in the absence of an intelligent designer, what have you got other than your lack of imagination?
Yeah, I would say it's not imagination. I would say we all know when something is complex and designed, especially if it's not symmetrical.
No, we don't all know that. And complexity is not a hallmark of design. As a matter of fact, simplicity is often a hallmark of design. We don't determine
from the example
design.
of computer code, like I try to write the simplest code possible to get the job done, not 20 different kludges. If I did that, I'd probably, okay, again, like because I also do data science and computer programming stuff, I'll have to take my code, push it up for everyone else to see and review before making it part of the code base. If I came back with a bunch of spaghetti code just all thrown together that barely gets the thing done, they would say, send it back and let's do some proper object-oriented coding and get this, cleaned up and figuring out what the hell did I just put together. If we're looking at the universe and we're seeing, these dozens of subatomic kinds of particles that are jutting together, randomly breaking apart from this weak force, you're going to explain why does the weak force even exist? Because all that does is just basically radioactive decay. This does not look like something that was put together to some great end. It looks like this is just the way that things bounce around together to create all the bigger things. It's also worth noting, atomic theory was basically started by, in some sense, the first anti-creationists in ancient Greece. The atomists that pushed this, like Epicurus, were basically atheists, and they explained the way the universe with just a bunch of atoms bouncing around and combining together to occasionally create suns, moons, planets, and peoples. This is what you expect on atheism. A bunch of stuff just slapping itself together and occasionally barely works, just like my monkey back occasionally works, except when I have to pick up something heavy.
Yeah. And you expect in a world that's designed, you wouldn't have, and this is an example that Dawkins and many of others have referenced many times, you wouldn't expect something like the laryngeal nerve of a giraffe to go all the way from its head down all the way the entire length of its neck, around its heart, and then back up. That's incredibly inefficient. It's not intelligent design, but it's exactly what you'd expect if nature is beginning with one design where a short-necked species, it's not particularly problematic for it to get looped around there. And then that just keeps extending as the neck continues to extend. And so the sorts of things that we'd expect to say, this is intelligently designed, don't really show up. I'm wondering, because you said that it's not a failure of imagination, but you literally started by saying you're suspicious and you can't think of another way. And that is literally a failure of imagination. But now that Aron and I have both addressed some of these points, do you have a response or rebuttal to those?
Well, if you look at two tennis rackets and a tennis ball, do you see design or what do you see?
When I look at what two things?
Tennis rackets and a tennis ball.
Sorry,
do you see design there?
I'm sorry, there was double talk. One more time, tell me what it is that I'm looking at, and do I see design?
You see two tennis rackets and a tennis ball. Are those two things designed for each other?
I see two tennis rackets and a tennis ball. Are those two things designed for each other? Maybe.
Yes.
We have evidence of tennis rackets being designed, and we have evidence that tennis balls are designed. And the way we recognize design is by contrasting it with that which naturally occurs. Now, I'm fine with easily saying, yes, we have mountains of evidence that both of those things are designed and zero evidence of either of those things occurring naturally. Whether or not they were designed for each other is a completely separate question. There are people, by the way, I was literally at Harbor Freight today. They'll sell you a tennis ball that does not say tennis ball. What it will say is garage parking marker, because people will hang that tennis ball. So the tennis ball can be used for something else. I don't know the history of the tennis ball enough to know that whether the ball was designed for the racket or whether the racket was designed for the ball or whether they were designed independently and put together as part of a design. What I am confident is that both of them were designed because we have direct evidence of them being designed and no evidence of them occurring naturally.
Yeah, but I would add that looking at the functionality, it's obvious they're supposed to hit a ball, and some kind of ball has been designed to be hit. And so I would say...
Which was designed for which? Which was designed for which there?
Well, I don't know which was first, but...
Cool. So you're in agreement with me that they were both designed and you don't know which one was designed necessarily for which. And when you say that, when you look at how they're used, that makes it obvious that they were designed together. Does that mean when I sit on a log, that the log was designed for me to sit on it?
Well, a bench was designed for you to sit on it.
I didn't ask about a bench. I asked about a log, but I can sit on a log and I can sit there and be comfortable. And so does that mean that the log was designed for me to be able to sit on it?
Well, the log was coincidentally there.
How do you know the log was coincidentally there? What if I went over and picked up the log, dragged it over, sat it down next to the fire specifically so that I could sit on it?
Well, I would look at the frequency distribution of the logs, and so it would either be a random distribution or somebody would have arranged it. And
that
so
seems
looking
to be
at the
a mistake.
frequency...
Why wouldn't you look at whether or not logs occur naturally?
Well, it's more complex than that because we know where logs
This
come
isn't
from,
about complexity. Complexity is not the hallmark of design. We recognize design by contrasting it with that which occurs naturally. How complex something is never going to be an indicator of design.
Yeah, but a bipart system or a tripart system is a signature of design because you have components.
Okay, you can't say yeah, but and then go into a bipart or tripart system when we're not even talking about that. If you're going to say that the cell is too complex to have evolved, nobody's saying that the cell evolved all at once in one go.
Yeah, okay, but evolution is a different debate. So I have opinions on that. I believe in evolution, but I don't, that's a whole different debate. The thing
I
is,
don't know what debate we're having.
I'm just saying that looking at particle physics, you have a multi-part system that seems to be functionally forming a whole, and usually like tennis rackets and the ball functionally forms a whole. That is a hallmark of design.
Okay, so hang on. So
if I may quickly ask one other question. So we keep talking about these subatomic particles are for some sort of purpose. What is the purpose of muons and pions and kaons? Because these also form from these same subatomic particle arrangements, but they don't make up anything living because they have extreme decay rates. We keep talking about quarks. Well, the thing is, the quarks that make up protons and neutrons, that's only 2 of the 6 types of quarks. So why are there top and bottom strange and charm quarks?
Well, they're always corollaries to any design, right? So...
Well, the thing is, there is no design for them, because do you know what the time frame is for how long a top quark survives? Like, if you create a top quark, how long can you have it in your hand before it decays?
Well, if you look at a computer screen, there's lots of light.
No. Answer my question. How long does a top quark stick around for? Because if I want to do something with this top quark, how long is it going to stick around?
Well, I can't tell you that out of my hand, but
I can tell you it's on the order of a trillionth of a second. You know what you can do with that? Absolutely nothing. Literally, we actually say that you can't even hadronize with a top quark. Literally, it decays too quickly for it to even combine with anything else to make higher order objects. So quite literally, what can you do with a top quark? Zilch, Not a thing. It literally falls apart too fast. Now try telling me, why is this part of the building blocks to the universe when the building block literally falls apart before you can even put it in the cement?
Well, there's another property of the universe that's it's non-deterministic, right? So you can see it's
How does that
designed.
do with my top quark problem?
Aubrey, are you going to actually address anything we've said, or are you just going to move on to the next thing on your script/checklist every time we point something out? Because I'm genuinely, I'm not ever going to be remotely interested in having conversations with people who raise a point and when it's rebutted, say, yeah, but, and go on to another point. That's not how these conversations should go ever.
But here's my counter answering. If
Cool.
you look at a computer screen, lots of the light don't hit your eyes. It goes out on the side. It's just an artifact of the design. It doesn't say anything. It's not part
The
of the
reason
main
the light
design.
goes from the side of the screen is that because I can see the screen from multiple angles. What can I do with the top quark?
I don't know. I really don't know.
The answer is nothing.
But I
So
don't
why did
see
the
that as
universe
a problem.
create stuff that literally does nothing to actually build up and create anything else? You're telling me these are these Lego pieces. I'm telling you, the universe creates Lego pieces that decay so quickly you can't even snap them together. That's literally
makes
how
sense
fast
if it-
top quarks decay.
But if you have quantum fields, you would expect things like that. You would expect
Why would I expect
particles
that? Why would I expect that?
like virtual
And why would a
particles
creator
pop into
create quantum mechanics that way? I don't know why you'd say any of that is expected. It sounds like what is expected, whatever it takes to get to theism. That's what it sounds like at this point.
But I mean, even the uncertainty principle stuff that's non-deterministic until you measure it, that could be by design, right? To bring into.
Why would we actually assume that's by design? You're now just assuming that which needs to be proven.
Yeah, you're basically after getting backed into a corner, you're like, that could be by design, right? How would we know? I don't know what could be by design. I don't know that any property of the universe, I don't know that the various constants or physical properties, I don't know that any of these could be designed. How do you demonstrate that it is possible that muons have been designed?
Well, let me do another counterexample. If you heat
No,
the
I
thinnest
don't
ball
want
of
another counterexample. I want you to present a mechanism by which you can determine that it's possible that muons were designed.
Well, I do not know enough to tell you what the functionality
Then why would
of
you
that
propose?
is.
Then why would you propose the possibility of design if you don't have any way of demonstrating that?
I think I have. I mean, gluons.
You literally just said that you do not have a mechanism for that. How can you come back at me now and say that you did demonstrate it?
But
you can't even demonstrate. No. I asked you to demonstrate how you knew it was even possible. You acknowledged that you could not do that. And then when I pointed out why on earth would you propose that it's possible if you can't demonstrate it, you then asserted that you had demonstrated. So last chance, can you or can you not demonstrate that it's possible that muons were designed?
Look, there are 17 particles, right?
I'm going to mute you and I'm going to ask my question completely calmly because people get irritated when I get pissed off that people refuse to answer the fucking question they were fucking asked. And some other people get pissed off when I start using profanity, but that's just always going to be the case. Once again, I'm going to ask the question, do you or do you not have a way to demonstrate that it is possible for muons to have been designed? That's a yes or no question. You either have a way to demonstrate it or you don't. Do you?
No.
Okay, then we're going to stop right there. We'll all go off and do some thinking. I'll take some other calls. You can hit Dr. Adair up when we're back on Skeptalk or the next time he's on here or whatever. But I genuinely don't see how we can actually make any more progress here when everything that you've raised, we've raised some objection. To be fair, Dr. Adair did all the heavy lifting here. And all you've done is move on to another point, but now you've circled back around. Now you want to start back at the beginning with there are 17 particles, which is exactly what you started with. I'm not interested in rehashing the last 23 minutes of this call all over again. If I'm wrong, and either you or Aron think that there's some way to move forward with the conversation, I'm happy to allow it. But otherwise, if not, I think we should stick a fork in it.
Okay. Thanks for your time.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Let's try this again.
I think it's actually a good day for him if he's in South Africa.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, if he's in South Africa, then it's probably getting close to sunrise for him.
Oh, yeah. Elijah in Texas is calling back. And this says, I see beauty in most religious traditions. Is that correct? Is that what you were going to say, Elijah?
Yes.
Cool. I don't care. Goodbye. And final caller for today, PK in New York, is a theist, pronouns are he, him. I'm gonna let the two of you commence talking because I see cosmic strings right off the bat, and so I'm going to sit back and listen and enjoy this. PK, welcome to the show. You're on with Dr. Adair.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know much about science, but these are just two things that I looked up when I'm searching for signs of God in the universe. So the first one is about cosmic strings. There's supposed to be these like hypothetical high energy defects in the universe due to uneven cooling in different areas after the explosion of the Big Bang. So there's different heating issues, heating and cooling differences. So you have these resulting high energy cracks in the universe. Do you think this would be pointing towards a god or against if they are discovered? Because if you have these like defects in God's creation, I think that would probably count against God's existence. But if you have like a completely flawless, polished diamond, then maybe it would be a signal towards God. And then the second one would be the imbalance of matter and antimatter.
Hang on, PK, hang on.
Okay.
It sounds like there's stuff crashing behind you. Let's pause right there and let Aron address that first question, because what you described doesn't sound like cosmic strings to me. And so I'm excited to hear more about this and get an answer to that question you asked, because I genuinely have no clue at this point.
Okay.
By the way, I think the sound might have been coming from my end.
Oh, well, my fault.
Okay. I just want to make sure when there's somebody to blame, it me. Okay. So
That's fair.
This whole thing about cosmic strings and them being kind of the after effect of like two regions of space-time that kind of heated differently. I honestly don't know too many of the details there, simply because we don't have any direct evidence as of yet for cosmic strings, so I haven't really read up too much on there. I believe there is a good episode from PBS Space-Time on YouTube that talks about that from a year or two ago, but the details leave me. So just to stick with, though, the idea, would this be a sign of imperfection and evidence against God or things like that? Historically, there have been people that have looked at that and said, hey, there are all these like mountains and craters on the moon. There are these sunspots on the sun. These show imperfections on the heavens, and this can't be consistent with God's creation. And so, Galileo, please shut up about this sort of stuff. You're making us look bad. And honestly, nobody thinks that way. Nobody says sunspots are somehow a disproof of God. I would probably say the same sort of thing. These defects, I wouldn't even call them defects. These should just be interesting regions or boundaries in the universe that would be really cool to know about. And I can imagine a science-believing Christian or other theist just to say, this is just the laws of the universe creating a new phenomenon for us to discover, and those laws were created by God in the first place. I wouldn't see that really as an argument there. If we want to look at imperfections, I would say, what are the things that we've seen to be imperfect from an all good God? So, childhood cancer. What the fuck is with that? That should be without excuse. So I look at that and I see that as a much bigger issue than cosmic strings.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that. And then my second.
I actually have something to add in real quick, if I can, PK, before you get to your second one. And that is that depending on which God or potential creator we're talking about, I can address this just from the standpoint of my background as an evangelical Bible-believing Christian. And that is that there may be, from a philosophical standpoint, an issue of whether or not a perfect being could possibly exist. And then a second issue of whether a perfect being could create something that was imperfect. I think a perfect being should easily be able to create something imperfect. But if you just look at it from what the Bible has to say, the Bible doesn't claim that God created perfection. In fact, at every point when God creates something, he just calls it good, not perfect. And so it may be a fairly simple apologetic to say, while the Christian model would show that sin and death came into the world through man's sin, any perceived imperfections in the structure of the universe aren't a problem, because God never claimed that the universe was perfect. God could be perfect and the universe could be imperfect, even intentionally.
Okay, well, I guess this would be like a question about his omnipotence, right? Because if you have like a broken ball, why would God create a broken ball purposefully? Like, who's going to fix that other than him?
Who says it needs to be fixed?
And who says that's broken? To me, I can imagine the response to that is, hey, it makes the universe prettier. In the same way a marble with its different colors in there, you wouldn't say it's broken just because you see these different lines in there. This is what makes the marble unique to look at. To me, if I were a theist, that would be an easy thing for me to explain, in the same sort of way that no theist today looks at the sun and sees sunspots. I shouldn't say any theist. There's probably some, because they're flat earthers too. But looking at the sun, seeing sunspots, and says that's an argument against God, or this is impossible on God. It's like, no, that's just what you expect on the surface of a hot ball of plasma spinning.
Okay. Yeah, the sunspot thing
I would apply the same logic to that.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know about the sunspot thing. That's interesting. Okay. Then I guess my second question would be about antimatter and matter, because I guess at the beginning they were supposed to be in equal amounts, and if they're in equal amounts, then I guess technically we wouldn't be able to have life, or nothing would really exist. It would just be like a broken, just empty radiation type universe. And I guess scientists haven't really discovered why exactly one was favored over the other. So my question would be, do you think in the future, like scientific discovery, is there like a potential of God playing a role in, I guess, cutting the stalemate and choosing one or the other, like choosing a different world? Because I don't think this scientific question is going to be answered soon. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll say this much. There are a few cases where we see matter is preferred over antimatter, but these are in really exceptional cases with particles that almost like never exist in day-to-day life. The previous caller, I mentioned something called kaons, and there are certain forms of kaon decay that actually slightly prefer decaying into matter instead of antimatter, but it's not enough of an effect to explain the state of the universe with its large amount of matter. So it is still an open question why matter dominated over antimatter. And honestly, whether it was matter or antimatter, as far as we can tell, each universe would look pretty much identical. So in a sense, it doesn't matter which one was quote unquote chosen. I don't know. I can't think of what an experiment would be done to show that one is selected for versus the other by some sort of outside intelligent force. If we're going to make progress, we're probably going to need to know more and more about the quantum fields and why in the extremely hot early universe, that there was this slight push to create this asymmetry. But it's an active area of interest and research. And I would say hop on the bandwagon and research it. We need more physicists to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, that's one of the top mysterious questions in physics, right?
It's one of the big ones, and whoever figures that one out, they at least deserve a bowl of ice cream, if not a Nobel Prize.
Great. Okay, yeah, I look forward to it. All right, thanks.
Cool. Thanks, PK. All right. Well, you made it. I tried to throw you as close to under the bus in the gauntlet as possible to get people to come in and challenge you on all the difficult science questions and explain everything about how the universe works, so that by the end of the show, we could say we've solved the problem of science communication and the world is just better. I don't think we quite got there, but I think we did a little bit to kind of help it move that direction. Always fun when we get you on here. We have super chats we're going to be reading. I've got the queue pulled up. And before that, there's two things I want to do. One, I'm going to run through the schedule really briefly. And that is that tomorrow on the Transatlantic Call-In Show, which starts at 2 p.m. Central, which is 6.5 hours before now tomorrow, Alexander and Aron Ra will be on that show. You can call in if you have questions about trans rights issues, if you've been called transphobic and are proud of it, if you've been called transphobic and desperately don't want to be called transphobic again, because something that's a perfect place for you to come in and not have to worry about using precise language. I am much, much, much more quick to shut down and hold a grudge when people come on, kind of, because I tend to get the trolls. I get the people who are intentionally misgendering people or, trying to say the most ridiculous things. But TACIS is a great place if you genuinely have questions or if you have genuine opposition to trans rights issues. It's a perfect place to come in and either make your case heard or get schooled and sent merrily on your way. Sunday on the Sunday show at 2 p.m. Central, also 6.5 hours prior to now, but on Sunday, Seth Andrews will be joining me for the Sunday show, where we're going to take on all theistic callers and everything else. And the Sunday show after dark at 7 p.m. is going to be Jimmy Snow and Eve Was Framed. Next Monday on Skeptalk, Shannon Q and Erika Gibbon will be on. Tuesdays, Chewed Gum is going to be Eve Was Framed and Alyssa Ljub. And next Wednesday's Hang Up, I do not currently have a guest for next week, but that's probably going to change over the next 2 days. There are a few people that I've been talking to. I just don't know what everybody's schedule is. I know I want to get David Fitzgerald back on here. He's got a new book coming out, and it's just been a while since David and I got to hang out. I just don't know if that's going to happen next week or not. Worst case, maybe we'll do round two of science communication. Get Erika or Aron or Forrest on here, because I genuinely love both. The excitement that a lot of people have for science is infectious, and all three of you are like, yeah, but what about this? And ooh, did you know about this? And there's like a little, there's always something to learn that reminds me. I could spend 1 billion years just sitting in this chair, never leaving this room, going through the stuff that we learn, because we're always learning something new. We learn more in a day than I could ever understand in a day. And so it is both a losing effort to try to keep up with all the science, and yet a completely winning effort, because trying to keep up with all the science, or trying to keep up with a good chunk of the science, is exactly how we make progress and move forward.
And I do want to say, I do kind of hope you do get David on the line next time. I've had a chance to get a preview of his upcoming book, and there's a lot of awesome stuff in there that he would love to chat your ear off about, I am sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. He had sent me a copy, but April was our busiest month, and I did not get a chance to review the book at all. I'm going to pop up a picture real quick. This is my calf.
Do you want me to do it on the... Oh, okay. That works.
So Seth Andrews drew that picture of a cat. at the previous Recovering from Religion fundraiser. And we had said that if we got to a particular dollar goal last time, I would get that tattooed on me. And we did not reach that dollar goal last time. But this time, the standard goal was $35,000, and I wanted to stretch that. And so I said, at $40,000, if we raise $40,000, I will get this tattooed on me. And as we raise even more money, I will move its location up to a more prime spot on my body. I made a joke video suggesting that I was going to get it tattooed on the top of my head. Huge thank you to Steve Byrne at Rock of Ages Tattoo here in Austin. Steve is an incredible tattoo artist, and there are people that wait months for him to do full body tattoos on them. We showed up like an hour before they closed just to try to find out if it was possible to get it done that night or if it would be better for me to come back on a different day. We told them what it was about. Steve was like, I can knock that out in no time. And it is freaking perfect. Like I was really clear. He's like, you want it to look exactly like that drawing? And I was like, yeah, I want every line to be exactly like that drawing. I want the signature. Don't add a tail to it. I love the fact that the cat doesn't have a tail. And you can see Seth's drawing off to the right. It is dead on the money. That is Seth's drawing now sitting on my calf forever. And I couldn't be happier about it. I know people will be like, oh, that you're just sticking by your word and everything else. I genuinely love that image. There is something about that image that is just perfectly charming. It is. Somebody said it's going to be great because now there's going to be people who think that was done by like my kid. Like I got my kid's drawing tattooed on me. I love the fact that that's going to be what some people think. I love the fact that the people in the community know what it's about. I am thrilled. I am thrilled to have that on my calf. It makes me want to wear shorts more often. That's how happy I am about it. But all right, let's get on to some super chats here. We're doing all the super chats over $5 tonight.
Super.
$9.99 from Greg Markowski. Thank you so much, Greg. And Greg is first, like, price 75% of the time here. Love science. Even as an artist in college, I pushed myself and took plenty of math and science outside of my area of study. When I retire, I may take a chemistry class or two to improve my knowledge. By the way, I love the widescreen shot of you, Aaron, because you get the full bridge.
Yes. If you need me, I'll be in my ready room.
Yeah.
All right. We got $4.99 from Megan Marie. Just finished reading Genesis as an atheist, and all I have to say is oof. Also, insert Aaron coin.
I don't understand.
I feel like I'm being inserted into a jukebox. Should I dance? I ought not to.
Perform for us, monkey boy. $20 from Etienne Unsen. As a devout Jimmy Snowist, I hereby declare that there is no God but Matt, and Jimmy is his prophet. I thank the Oracle Aaron for his scientific revelation. O Almighty Matt, ruler of the line, when shall be your next debate? I can tell you that because of the busyness of our reptile schedule in April and June, May was my month off, and I'm going to be trying to head out to have some oral surgery, so I don't have any debates booked anytime soon. But we are still taking applications. If you go to QAnaline.com, you can find the application there to be on NBOS or one of the other debate shows. But I am also setting up some. I've already reached out to Than Christopoulos, who I debated on Good Friday. Wow. Couldn't remember the religious holiday that I debated Than on Good Friday. We're probably going to do some debate review stuff together and probably some other discussions as well. And there's a few other people that we're looking to get involved. Part of it is I am sick to death of Jerry Springer-esque debates with, fascist trolls who lie about what they want to talk about in order to get in and do to give me the definition of a woman and explain to me how a man can be pregnant, instead of, hey, we're going to compare secular humanism to a Christian worldview and see which one's better. It's really easy for me to explain to anybody how a man can get pregnant. Trans men often have ovaries and a womb. Not always, but trans men often have the physical equipment that allows them to become pregnant. Boom. I don't even know why that. Oh, wait, are you saying that trans men aren't men? Then you didn't even want to debate about how men can get pregnant. You want to debate about the category. But the problem is you're defining men as what I would say is cis men, and you're defining women as what I would say is cis women. And there aren't trans women claiming to be cis women, and there aren't trans men claiming to be cis men. So what you're saying when you're saying, they're not men, is you're really saying they're not cis, which they've already acknowledged by saying they're trans. It's just a really dumb argument across the board.
Apparently, the insert coin thing is a reference that is used on Skeptalk for Erika and Forrest to get a fun science fact that I did not know about. So they were requesting a fun fact.
Oh, shoot. I apologize. Thank you for being in the know, Arden. Okay. Science fact. Okay. We can take a picture of the inside of the sun using a neutrino telescope. We can actually see inside the sun, and because neutrinos are given off during atomic fusion, we can actually see at the core of the sun the fusion going on there, because it's sending a stream of neutrinos that we can detect with our very sophisticated devices down here, and collect that up, and you can get an image of the inside of the sun and its fusion centers using neutrinos.
I have science questions for you later, but I want to get through the super chats right there.
All right, I think I can read this. 1999 from SH. Elm teacher of 16 years. Ooh, I've seen science really pushed to the side as we are forced to spend more time on standards for reading, writing, and math. Science curricula is also typically not robust, and there's a lack of training. I never taught at the elementary level. All my teaching has been at either the college or high school level, but I definitely saw that especially when you got standards, you got major tests, that are you teaching to the test? Because otherwise the students get reprimanded, the teacher gets reprimanded. You betcha. Does that leave much room then for doing these great curious explorations? Not really, because guess what? Kid doesn't learn how to be curious. Administration doesn't care. Student doesn't know how to answer some trivial question that they're going to forget about 6 months later. All hell breaks loose. Believe me, SH, I feel for you so much.
And by the way, appreciate you during Teacher Appreciation Week. 140 South African Rand from Searching Deeper. The standard model particle physics shows the universe is designed. This may have been the caller that we got earlier. In effect, you have matter particles and force carrying ones interacting selectively, like tennis rackets and balls. So I don't think there's anything more to go into on this, since we addressed it all during the call, but thank you for the super chat and for the call.
Mm-hmm. So we got $10 from Greatest Apist. Praying to Jesus and Joe Pesci is useless. This is why I pray to Matt instead. There's $10 to grease the wheels a bit. All right.
That'll
I
work.
like the donation, and I like the subtle nod to a George Carlin stand-up routine. So well done, sir.
You got some Carlin in there. Plus, you gave us money, and trust me, prayers to me definitely benefit from donations. 999 from I Am Conrad. I have dreams, nightmares of being back in the Navy too. But when I wake up, it makes me all the more thankful for my current reality, which doesn't involve a morning muster. Cheers for DD214s. I need to actually get a new copy. I don't know where my previous one is, of my DD214, so that when I get my driver's license redone, I can actually get on my driver's license that I'm a veteran, because I didn't know that was an option. And so every time I go into a business and they've got some kind of veterans discount or veterans parking, mostly nobody ever asks, but on the off chance they do ask, it would be nice to have something. that I can point to. So thanks for the
Oh,
reminder.
I might
about
need to
that,
tell my
Glenn.
wife about this as well. My wife is former Army, so she'll otherwise have to carry around her old military ID.
Yeah, I have the picture of the day that the day I enlisted, but I don't look anything like that anymore. So they could just be like, you just downloaded this off the internet.
All right, so we got £5 from Vincent King. It's my birthday, and I'll Fergal Burgle my Benergal Burgle if I want to. Love to all hosts, mods, and producers. YGH, you go hide? I'm terrible with acronyms.
YGH is specifically for me because one
right.
of the transphobic commenters just decided to post their entire comment was, "You're gay, homie." And we laughed so hard at that that it became a thing. We put it on mugs and t-shirts and all kinds of stuff because I'm like, they're constantly trying to come after me and Arden, and I'm just like, if I was gay, I'd say I was gay. I don't really give a shit if I'm gay or not, if I'm gay, bi, pan. I don't know why it's important. There are people who are way too focused. There are people more focused on my sex life than me, and I think that says a lot about them. But it's all good. $5 from the Raven 200, my new PFP. And by the way, Raven, Arden will tell you that my YouTube stuff has been full of wrestling content for the last probably 3 weeks. I like watched one or two cool things and was showing her some stuff from, the old days. And then, man, the YouTube algorithm was like, let's flood him with wrestling stuff. So I've been like reliving, the WCW, WWF wars at the time. But anyway, Raven said, my new PFP is Gall of Gorgoroth, one of my favorite corpse paint designs. Jimmy, go take our Razor's Edge from the bad guy, Razor Ramon, Chico. Actually, I watched some stuff with Scott just this morning. Actually, there was a clip of a number of times where fans decided to get in the ring, and how wrestlers and referees reacted. There was a great one where this tiny referee just completely took the fan out. There's another one where Triple H like belly to back suplex a dude right on his head. And there's another one of Scott Hall just smacking this guy and telling him, by the way, when the show's over, we're pressing charges. I just laughed. For non-wrestling fans, that was fun.
If I may?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I apologize for being out of it in one of the great sports. All right. But nonetheless, we got $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Me asking God, what time is it? And him turning around with the face of Bill Clinton. It depends on the definition of is. That's the best impression I got. You gotta get $5 more for me to even think about improving that. Reality is a mind fuck. That is absolutely true. Mr. Monkey at the Typewriter.
Yeah. We had a conversation, on the last show where I had to go and point out that one of the reasons we are the way we are is because our brain is constantly making up most of what we think about reality. When you think you have a solid field of vision, like right now, I can see, hey, there's two monitors, a light, there's a camera, there's my keyboard, the mouse, this, I can see books up there, I can see all this other stuff. You think that you're seeing all of this, but you're not. Your eyes dart around and your focus darts around and your brain makes shit up, which is why it's basically like, hey, I haven't processed anything from over here in a while, but nothing's likely to change over there. I haven't noticed any change, so I'm just going to keep painting that thing the same. It's funny because the way our brains do this it makes us great at inferring things about reality. But it also helped lead in some way to compression algorithms for photographs and motion pictures. So like the MPEG standard is about changes from the last frame in some regards. I don't remember if that's still the way MPEG 4 is processing or not, but it's like if it hasn't changed, we don't need to update that one. So we can compress the image a lot more by saying basically this pixel or this clump of pixels stays the same for the entirety of the video. This fake screen behind me, nothing has to be done with that until, I cast a shadow or do something else in there. Anyway, good stuff.
I believe this is your reading.
It is mine. $5 from Jacob Smith. Aron, what do you think about the big bounce concept? Do you think it could be true? And do we have enough information to tell if it is?
So at least the earlier forms of the big bounce seem to be unlikely, considering we're now, like the earlier big bounce model would require there to be enough matter in the universe to collapse it back down. And because we see that the critical density of the universe is pretty much exactly what you'd have for a flat universe, and we also throw in that we have dark energy, which is actually accelerating the rate of expansion, that version of big bounce concepts can't work. There is another newer version that I have not really explored much. I think the Turek is the main physicist who's been pushing that, but I think it also requires string theory and or supersymmetry, and I haven't seen any good evidence for that. So I'm not I'm not big on string theory, and since that's a requirement for it, as far as I remember, it's not an avenue that I think will be successful.
Right.
All right, we got $4.99 from the gayest husky. If God designed the universe, then what would mean he designed that annoying little penile blister named Deep Santis, I believe is the correct pronunciation. Well, I have never seen the argumentum ad desantum, but I'm willing to add it to my arsenal of arguments in the next debate I might get invited to. And that's another way of saying that ain't going to happen.
Whoops.
Bad politicians is, at the very least, I'm pretty sure the free will defense would deal nicely with politicians we don't like.
$10 from Zetsu Nawa. Home late, so I'll have to rewind and watch from the beginning. A great combo. Host, thank you both for doing what you do. Thank you, Zetsu.
Thank you.
And I will skip past your avatar, other than saying, yeah, I know what that is.
All right, we got $5 from Doc I apologize, Doc Pleuromonaut. Yes, I've seen you before, and I'm sorry that my tongue cannot get it right the first time. So, question from Doc, or statement from Doc. Aron, can you put a word in for my boy Derek Lambert to get a host slot? I can mention to Derek, and you can as well if you'd like to. I guess it's just a matter of does it work out with his time. That's right. Yeah, he was. So
last week.
Yeah, so he's pretty connected to this group already. As far as I know, nobody has thrown shade at him, so he would hopefully want to hang out with us. I mean, well, maybe not with me, but maybe you other guys.
Give me 1 second.
I wish I had a cricket sound effect to fill up the blank space that you're just leaving here with your.
No, I left that space intentionally just so I could type one sentence, because I just sent Derek a text saying, "Do you have a free Wednesday this month to guest on the Hang Up?" So there, I mean, if you're willing to pay just to get Aron to recommend somebody that we're already familiar with and who was on the fundraiser, yeah, cool. I haven't had, I don't think I've had Derek on the Hang Up, so we can do that. Derek had me on his show before. It's only fair. $5 for Monkey at Typewriter. Would it be appropriate to call that the sacrificial calf? Honestly, I love it, and it's great work. Good show, guys. I think you could get down a sacrificial calf pun there. I'm honestly kind of hoping that next year we get a similar drawing of similar quality facing the other direction for something else, so that I could have both calves done. But we'll see what happens.
What you also want to do, Matt, I think, is get some really good bronzer. Then it can become the golden calf.
There you go. Yeah, because I'm not actually going to go out and subject my skin to the skin cancer of the sun. So I'll get the fake tan stuff. Thanks, Monkey.
All right, we got $5 from Jason Jones. Felis catus is your taxonomic nomenclature, an endothermic quadruped, carnivorous by nature. I'm sorry, Jason, but I have to put you up for plagiarism. We know this poem was composed in the 24th century by Lieutenant Commander Data. And we do not appreciate plagiarism on this show. Even if the plagiarism is happening 3 centuries before the poem was composed.
Nice. $20 from Jay Anderson. See how easy it is? I got the easy one. Nothing to it. Boom.
No, I think what the text is written in white.
Oh. Highlight that.
All right. Now we got $20 from Opus the Penguin. Matt is a staple, but Aaron, you were on point tonight. Holy hell, I'm a fan. Thank you. Please recommend something I can read that is along your expertise, but is made for newbies. Okay, so first off, Opus, thank you for the extremely kind words. If you want something for newbies, I suppose you mean in the area of physics or astronomy. And let me just think here, just quickly looking at my bookshelf, and honestly, I could imagine some of the books by Neil deGrasse Tyson could be a good starting point just for getting a good layman's feel on things. If you want to start approaching it with the math stuff, well, there's more to it, unfortunately. There's a lot that could happen there. So I guess it depends on where you want to go with this stuff. But yeah, stuff by Tyson is probably good. I wouldn't necessarily recommend Michio Kaku just because I think he gets a little bit too on the hype train for a lot of things. So, that's just a matter of how you want to present things. Ooh, actually, Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe. While, again, I don't have the kindest things to say for string theory, the first parts of Brian Greene's book explaining quantum mechanics and general relativity is, I think, the best explanations in layman's terms I've ever seen. So even just for those first few chapters, The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene, strong recommendation.
I think I debated his brother.
I've met Brian Greene's in-laws at a party, of all things.
Yep, I'll have to double check that later. By the way, Derek's going to be on the hang up on the 22nd. See how easy that is? When I have a month like this month where I have openings in the schedule ready to fill in, I'm happy to. You guys can always recommend people, and if you do it by super chat, it's more likely to actually happen. But that one just worked out pretty well. 20 pounds from the cake is a lie. Speaking of science, there's been a major new discovery in biology published involving something called nitroplasts. Look it up, folks. I am not familiar.
New to me. I don't even know the word. So we got $9.99 from Steven. Amazing show. When is the show for trans questions? So that's the transatlantic tomorrow afternoon, if I'm not mistaken, right, Matt?
That is 2 p.m. Central. Transatlantic call-in show with Luxander and Arden Hart tomorrow. I got one thing. I'm going to ask you a science question, which is, I think, outside of your specific field, but I think you might have some information. We often hear from people who seem to think that we can only know and understand the things that we can actually see. So we have problems with the past, problems with history, because, were you there to see it? How do you know that there was, Tiktaalik this many years ago, and et cetera? I've always been curious about the fact that the entirety of we live on on a planet, and even the deepest parts of our ocean are still just part of the crust. The deepest hole we've ever dug is about 7 miles, and the crust of the Earth is 25 miles. So the question is, how do we know that the crust is 25 miles? And how do we know what's deeper than 7 miles all the way down to a molten, switching magnetic core if we can't actually drill down and see it?
So my memory of how this is done is actually through earthquakes, and the fact that earthquakes will generate waves, and waves will travel through medium, and when the media changes from going from one kind of media to another, that actually changes the speed of sound, and that actually deflects the path of that wave. So you can actually figure out the changes in density of the materials that you're going through that. And you can also see where that's happening, because then you can see if it's been deflected by so much, then you can see, trace it back to where it must have deflected at, and you can see then how thick the crust is or how thick the various other layers are. I believe we also found out that the core is solid metal, because when you have an earthquake in California and you have a detector on the other side of the Earth looking for those waves to come straight through, they don't. They get blocked. So I believe that's the basic understandings of how we figure out the very basics of the structure on the inside. Basically, the Earth provides sonar for us, and we see how the waves get deflected around.
The Earth provides its own ground penetrating sonar by having plate tectonics shift and create earthquakes that see? That's why you guys tune in to the line. And that's why I love having Dr. Aron Adair here on the Hang Up. Aron, what have you got going on? Where should people come find you? I'm gonna wrap this all up, but I want to make sure that in addition to seeing you on occasion on Skeptalk, they know where else to find you and your stuff.
Yeah, so website that I try to maintain is draronadair.com. That has my socials and things that I've published, talks I've given. Currently working on a book with my co-author on the Exodus, what we might be able to say actually happened, and a whole lot of what probably didn't happen. That's in work progress here. I should also mention that the previous book that John and I had put together was Aliens and Religion, Where Two Worlds Collide. It's been now available for just over a year, so you still have time to get it from Amazon. Otherwise, let's see here. We're doing a talk at Society of Biblical Literature later this year, so I do Bible study stuff where I pretend to know things in other subjects. So I could be wrong in lots of things. That's my thing, and call me out on all the things I'm wrong about. I'll learn a thing or two.
That's it for tonight's Super Chats. And first of all, a huge thank you to Aron for agreeing to be here, for Arden for producing, to our call screener and all of our mods, and to everybody who showed up in chat. Thank you so much for the people who called, including the couple of trolls, because it was so much fun having Elijah call back. There are things that just really make me feel good. But in addition to the Sunday show, where we focus primarily on religion and religious claims or supernatural claims and things in that nature, I've been hosting this show, The Hang Up, for quite a while, and I will continue to. But one of the things that happens on here is we talk about whatever I happen to feel like talking about. Sometimes it's going to be about social justice issues. Sometimes it's going to be about political issues, especially during election year. There's a lot going on. I was listening to Trump's hush money trial, or listening to coverage of the hush money trial, since you can't actually listen to the trial, most of yesterday and the day before, while I was cleaning out the garage. And I'm still not done cleaning out the garage, but man, tomorrow or Friday, whenever it's done, this garage is going to look awesome, and I'm going to be able to take pictures of it. But I pick out whatever it is that I feel like, because I'm an obsessive learner. I love finding out new stuff. I'm sure I've heard about earthquakes being used as sonar before, but having an explanation like that, put so succinctly, gives you guys a tool when you find yourself engaged with your relatives who don't seem to understand science and want to dismiss evolution, or want to dismiss climate change, want to dismiss vaccines. And they can only go down a couple of different paths. One of them is to suggest that there's some massive conspiracy among the scientific community to prop up something. if that's the case, you can kind of set the science aside and have a conversation about what it would take to actually engage in that sort of conspiracy, and what the world would look like if that was going on, if there was this massive construct of keeping science for the elite and using it to lie to people. Another method they can go down is to just suggest that science is constantly changing. But the best thing to do is to point out that that is a strength of science, that it is dogma and religions that make a proclamation and then stick with it no matter what the evidence says, that the scientific methods actually involve exploring and investigating and providing tentative explanations that are updated and refined and constantly improving. And in the entire history of the world, the only thing that has ever demonstrated bad science is better science. At no point has any religion come along and said, your finding of science is wrong, and here's how we can show it. Because religions don't have methodologies. Religions don't have a method to explore the world, to come up with accurate models of the world. Now, getting little pieces of information like, how do we know what's below the crust? How do we know whether or not there's a molten core? All of those things are good. But what we really need to do is make sure that some of you are running for local public office, including school boards, to help determine what gets voted in as curriculum, especially if you're in Texas, because Texas is such a large adopter of school books that the books that get approved and used in Texas get used in other states as well. They'll just go with what Texas has because they've already done the work. There are changes that are constantly trying to enter into every aspect of the educational books that we provide to schools. We need people involved in that. We need people running for office. We need people doing whatever they can to inspire others to care about and be excited about the process of discovery that led us to this world where you are watching myself and Aaron on some device. Probably a lot of you have it on your mobile phone. You're just sitting there going, I can't even really see it. The screen's so small, but gosh, that guy looks handsome. And who knows who you're even talking about? We have progressed to the point where you have a device, wireless, that you can just carry around, and you can watch movies, videos, podcasts, live streams, or you can look up whatever you want. We have access to so much information. I think part of the problem is that it becomes overwhelming to people. And so just have fun with it and encourage the next generation to try to find the fun. Maybe they're not going to find fun in geology. Maybe they will. Maybe they're not going to find fun in biology. Maybe they will. Maybe you will inspire the person who comes up with a cure for cancer, not because they're necessarily trying to cure cancer, but because they're trying to explore some new avenue of the world where there's a gap and it leads to a discovery that none of us actually expected. It is incredible, the access to information we have, and it is shameful, the division and confusion that we have in this modern world amongst educated adult individuals on topics of science. And how are we going to make progress on the really difficult questions that we're going to be facing if we can't even get past the ones we already know to a good degree? Y'all take care of yourself. We'll see you back. Don't forget to tune in to the Transatlantic Call-In Show tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Go learn some more science.
Keep on keeping on.
Hey, there's a list of all our patron producers. Look, I see Steve and Olaf and Paul and Marvin and Airplane and Brian and Galaxy and Kathleen and Kelly and Trent, Jared and Larry and Bethany and Ruthless. And I'm not even going to be able to do them all because I'm just stubborn on myself. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Patreon.com/Paul the Law.